in the search, and then you'll find us. You'll find a live stream, and then you can share that link. A lot of people wanted to be here, but they couldn't. So share that link. We started doing some research on what Teoshpayas are at Standing Rock and Cheyenne River, Rosebud, Pine Ridge. So that we need that because that is sovereignty. That is powerful. We need at some point we need to develop a platform to register what Teoshpaya you belong to, and that's important for Lakota traditional leadership. I better not say anything about IRA. I might get fired when I get home. What I heard a long time ago was that in the old days, when John Collier brought the Constitution to your reservation, there was two groups that was one group was the called the New Dealers, and the old traditional chiefs was the Old Dealers. The Old Dealers didn't want to didn't want the IRA government, and they could have not accepted that, and it would have been just fine. But the New Dealers was the young people, and they accepted it. So and that's how we went forward in time. But we can come together and change that. We're not stuck to the floor. So something to think about when it comes to treaty rights. I really count on the treaty councils for treaty rights because of Article 6 of the 1851 Fort Laramie Treaty, where the United States government pledged to work with the chiefs and the successors, which is the treaty councils. So the treaty councils are in the treaty. So we need to wake up to that. We need to get serious about that. Why not?
Okay, we're going to go right on the agenda. We're at 1 o'clock. We're going to turn it right on over to Andy Reid for international treaty rights.
There you go. How's that? Great. I got a few young people in here. I was hoping more of the young people would stay here. I'm Andy Reid. I teach Indigenous Peoples Law at the University of Denver, Sturm College of Law. I've been practicing federal Indian law and Indigenous Peoples Law at the international level now for over 40 years. And I'm getting old, so I'm really looking forward to maybe some young Native people to kind of take over the torch here for some of this international stuff. But anyway, the area of specialty that I work in, and I work with a number of Native people around the world now. I'm working with the Garfunas, for example, in Belize and Honduras, and I work with some people up in Canada, and a lot of you know me from my work here with the Oglalas and others. But the my area is basically colonialism. It's getting outside the federal domestic Indian law. I call that colonial Indian law box, and starting to look at what the real situation is. Kind of looking at that. So I always get more material than I have time for, so I'm gonna start going through this as quickly as I can. Maybe I get it done quick enough so that I can answer some questions if there are any. But anyway, let's get started here. And I've said this before, and I mean it. You should never trust anything I say on its face value. You should do your own thinking, your own research, and so forth. I'm here mostly to provide. I'm Oceti. I'm mostly here to provide tools, and I don't want to be part of the part of the misguiding history that white people have had with Native people around the world. So also don't just because I'm a lawyer. Lawyers are they're made to think a certain way that supports the people in power uh, and promotes their propaganda. We're brainwashed, and so a part of being able to think this thing through is you have to stop thinking so much like a lawyer and start understanding what it's like to be a victim. So do your own thinking. You got to be careful. It may cause you to be independent. And the focus here is that I want you to understand that I want to be able you to be able to understand what the concepts of empire and imperialism and colonialism. One thing we don't think about because we've been living with it for so long is that the United States is an empire, and that it has a colonial relationship. Colonialism is a relationship of dominance and rule, and it has a colonial relationship with the native people here. It inherited the United States inherited its empire from initially from England and then France with the Louisiana Purchase, and then we got more of the land, including Colorado, New Mexico, Arizona, California, from Spain, Florida as well. And so it's a what I would call a successor colonial state. In other words, for Native people, they were first colonized by the English and the French and the Spanish, and it makes no difference. They're still colonized today, 300 years later, by the successor to those colonial powers from Europe. And so the goal of colonialism is ethnic cleansing. It's assimilation, genocide. That's the ultimate goal of colonialism. The ultimate goal, and it's my position, and I think I have some expertise on this, some experience. It's my position that all federal Indian law is has one goal, and that's the ultimate assimilation of Native nations and peoples, the destruction of Native sovereignty, identity, and separateness. So that essentially it wants to get Native people to be an ethnic minority within a larger American society, and it wants to be able to take all of their resources and land. So you'll see it in a lot of different ways in the law. Linguicide, which is a destruction of language, cultures, genocide, which is also known as ethnocide, the destruction of the culture. We see that right now in the Indian Child Welfare Act litigation, where one of the ways that they destroy Native people is the theft of their children. Now, one of the founders of international law, the law of nations, is Imre de Vattel, and he's cited several times by Chief Justice John Marshall when he created federal Indian law as an authority. Well, one thing that Marshall didn't pay any attention to was Vattel said that people who are occupied, who are colonized, are in a state of perpetual war. And it doesn't mean you have to have guns, but that as long as you resist, as long as you don't agree to being ruled over and colonized, that you are in this situation of war. And for the way that they use the law is something that they call now, this is a term that's come out in the last 10 years or so. It's called lawfare. And it's a recognition that colonial powers use the law as a weapon of war. And so all federal Indian law is a weapon of war. It's a weapon of war against Native people. And so is lawfare. Um, and on an international level, it's the law of colonial occupation. And the the law of colonial occupation was essentially created by Chief Justice John Marshall in three decisions from the 1820s and 30s. The first one being the McIntosh decision in 1823. We're coming up on the 200th anniversary of that decision coming up. And in those decisions, he came up with the three doctrines of colonial Indian law. And these are the three doctrines that control the lives of Native people and nations today. The first one you're probably familiar with, the doctrine of discovery. Steve Newcomb calls it the doctrine of Christian domination. I call it the doctrine of theft. It's simply the doctrine of theft, legalized theft. The second one is the trust doctrine. which is the doctrine of loss of rights. And essentially, what the trust doctrine says is that Native people are incompetent, and therefore they should not be allowed to have control over their own affairs, and that creates this trust relationship. That's why you have trust territories and trust property and so forth, that Native nations and peoples live under. And essentially, what it does is it deprives Native people of the right to control their own lands and resources and territories. And then the last one is known as the plenary power doctrine. And, uh, and that plenary power doctrine says, well, if Native people are incompetent, they can't take care of themselves. The United States will have that trust relationship, and it gives the United States total control over Native people, absolute power. And so in Johnson v. McIntosh was when they started this. The initial one was the doctrine of discovery. And then one of the ways that they rationalized the doctrine of discovery was they said not only were Native people not Christians and therefore not allowed to own their property, but they were also uncivilized savages. And so and this is in the opinion. This is the U.S. Supreme Court talking about Native people, that Native people are uncivilized savages, and therefore they have no right, no concept of property, and no right to own the land that they occupy in the territory. Um, and so then they also, as part of that, they created, because they're uncivilized savages, therefore they need somebody to take care of them. So they came up with this term, domestic dependent nations, where they're domestic, meaning that they're within the boundaries of the colonial power of the United States, dependent because they are incompetent savages in the nations, and and then they also recognize that they're nations, that they are peoples, and so forth. And that was in the Cherokee Nation case, which was the second one. And so this concept of plenary power is one that's being invoked the most often now recently. It was stated in the third decision, which was the Worcester decision, and the plenary power is the one that Native people end up running into the most right now. It's the plenary power doctrine which authorized the Dakota Access Pipeline. It's the plenary power doctrine which authorizes the uranium mining of treaty lands. It's the plenary power doctrine that has done most of the damage. Uh, One of the early exercises of the plenary power doctrine was in 1871 when Congress said, we're not going to do any more treaties, Native people. So essentially, they deprive Native people from being able to act as sovereign nations and independent powers. And they said, no more treaties. And then they used their plenary power doctrine to break up the Oceti, Sakowin, Oceti, the Great Sioux Nation. And they did it in 1877 when they took Haisapa and all the lands in between. And one thing, we talk a lot about Haisapa, the Black Hills, but they took all the land in between as well. And so basically all of South Dakota should be Indian land, tribal land. And we should keep that in mind. And then in 1880, they broke up the Great Sioux Nation into a Great Sioux Reservation, which was the land left over after the 1877 taking, into the different reservations that we have right now. And in the process, they took the land in between the reservations. Now, there was no treaty for either of these takings. There's no treaty that allowed either this one in 1877 or the one in 1880. It was all done by plenary power under the doctrines of colonial rule. So exercise of colonial power. There's no treaties. And so the breakup, at least I view it as part of a divide and conquer tactic policy that the colonial power has. And we see that today where the different reservations fight among each other, tribal councils and treaty councils, and Standing Rock and Oglala and Shiner. Nobody can ever come to any agreement. And this is a direct result of splitting up the reservations in 1880. And then on top of that, then they require this relationship. They impose this relationship where the United States is a great white father and has total control over everything. As part of that was the IRA. So in the 1930s, they created the Indian Reorganization Act as a model to bring You see, got that, to bring Native people into a quote modern governance. And in doing that, they're destroying culture. This is part of the cultural destruction. This is part of the assimilation. And this is a quote from somebody who talks about the IRA as being part of that process of assimilation. Now, they sold it to Native people as a process of being able to gain you, come into the modern world, get your sovereignty and independence, being able to exercise a fair authority over your own affairs. But that was basically BS. All of it was put underneath the Bureau of Indian Affairs. Um, all IRA governments are chartered by the United States government, meaning they get their authority directly from the United States. IRA governments do not get their authority through their inherent sovereignty. They get it through charter with the United States. This one's Rosebuds. Um, I call it a death by a thousand cuts in a way, because what they did is that uh, the Chinese have it's a torture called lingchi, but they use these different laws, which they say are for the benefit of Native people, but actually deprives them of their sovereignty. One, of course, was the Indian Citizenship Act of 1924, where they imposed U.S. citizenship on Native people, in a sense, getting them away from their citizenship within their own nations. You know, are you a Lakota citizen? Are you a citizen of the Oceti Sakowin? Are you a citizen of the United States? Or both? You know, there's nothing saying you can't have dual citizenship. But the thing about this is this is making Native people into a minority group, an ethnic minority group of the United States, and the similar Citizenship Act in Canada is under challenge right now. I think this was illegal. The only way to the citizenship is not defined by Congress; it's defined by the U.S. Constitution, and Native people are not included as citizens under the U.S. Constitution. So the only way that they could legally make, and I'm speaking as a lawyer, could make Native people U.S. citizens, they'd have to amend the Constitution, which they didn't do. So no one's ever challenged this to mine. Then they did it in 1868, where they undermined the sovereignty of Native nations by passing the Indian Civil Rights Act and imposing Wasatchu values, civil rights and so forth on all Native people. And it's continued today, where they all everything's from my point of view anyway. And I've been looking at this for 40 years now from the outside as a Wasatchu lawyer. Is all of it's designed to deprive Native people of their sovereignty, their authority, their resources, and their lands, and their identity. With the recent decision of McGurk from a few years ago, a lot of you are familiar with, was lauded by everyone, saying, "Well, it's great because the U.S. Supreme Court recognized that there was a treaty obligation for the territory of the Muskogee Creek Nation in Oklahoma." Well, in fact, and you hear a lot of Indian lawyers out there. They had seminars at most of these law schools where they teach Indian law, talking about how great this decision is. Nobody, in my mind, nobody really read that decision closely. If you read the decision closely, you'll see that Justice Gorsuch, who wrote that decision, uh, he talks a lot about how the federal government had stolen the culture, had stolen the court, had stolen the government, had stolen their lands. It basically wiped out the sovereign authority of the Muskogee Creek people. But he said the one thing they hadn't stolen yet was the territorial boundaries. And so he didn't. He had an opportunity to say that all of these other thefts, the theft of their governance, because they imposed, like the ERA, they imposed a Western style government, so they lost their traditional government. They took their lands through an allotment program, and so forth. So they had these set of laws where they were basically destroying the Muskogee Creek people, and he said he had an opportunity to throw all that out, and he didn't do that. What he did was he just simply said they hadn't, Congress yet hadn't taken their territorial boundaries. He ends his opinion, and this is probably the most important part of the opinion, saying that even though they haven't taken it, they can take it anytime they want under the plenary power doctrine. That's the decision right there. So what he's doing is he's telling Congress exactly what they need to do if they want to completely destroy the Creek Nation, and that's simply use their plenary power to take it anytime they want at their will. And that was followed up a few years later in this other decision called the Casco-Ureta decision. And that one they extended, and this same court, this is the court we have right now, they extended state criminal jurisdiction onto Indian country, which affected the sovereignty of all native nations. Right. This is court we're looking at. And now they have a case right before them right now that's already been argued. I think Phil talked about it, but and it'll be decided next year on whether or not to throw out the Indian Child Welfare Act. Now, the Indian Child Welfare Act, and it'll be talked about, I think tomorrow or some other time on the agenda, but it was meant to stop the theft of Native children. It was stopping genocide. The theft of Native children is genocide. The adopting out of Native children into white families is genocide under international law. And the Indian Child Welfare Act was passed to stop that. Now that looks like the Supreme Court may toss that out. I think most people say that this court is very anti-Native, certainly anti-Native sovereignty, and is likely to throw out the Indian Child Welfare Act, which will open the door again for Native children being adopted out into non-Native families. So this is seen kind of as a domino effect. If it's tossed out, then the way that they'll toss the Indian Child Welfare Act is they're going to say it's racist, that it's giving Native people special treatment just because they're Native, because they're Indian. And they're going to say that's racist and that's not allowed under the U.S. Constitution. Well, the fact is, the reason why they treat Native people differently is because they're Native nations, they're peoples, and they're not ethnic minorities. So this would be part of that process of converting Native people into ethnic minorities. And so there's this continuing invasions, and that will continue, that will go on and on. One that I've been working on now for 40 years is the Crow Butte uranium mine. We just pretty much completed this. It's upstream from Pine Ridge. This is one of the hearings. And we got a good initial decision in which they held that the environmental assessment that they had to do had to consider the interests, the spiritual and cultural interests of the Oglalas. And we also were able to get a decision saying that the Oglalas had the right to do their own survey, that it wasn't up to the Oceti to determine what the cultural interests were of the Native peoples, it was up to them. And so we completed that survey in September of 2021, and then they issued the final environmental assessment about a couple of months ago in October. And so that was a major victory, but they still, it's not going to stop the mine. And I raised jurisdictional issues, treaty issues, and so forth in that, and they just ignored it. Another battle that's going on that you're probably familiar with is the Dewey Burdick Power Tech battle that's been going on for quite a while. There was a decision issued in August, an appellate decision. They authorized the mine. This Nuclear Regulatory Commission in the United States authorized the mine, and then it was appealed. And in August, the Oglala Sioux tribe lost that one. It's on appeal now, I think, to the full court, but I have no expectations that will be successful. As you know, there are there's lots of other mineral development activity and extract activity going on in treaty lands in Wyoming and throughout the Black Hills. These are ongoing issues that are not going away. So what I wanted to focus in, and a lot of you have seen me before, I've heard a lot of this stuff before, but I wanted to get a little more focus this time. I don't want to talk about this be a law school class so much, but about what do you do about it. So first thing I think we need to recognize, and Native nations and people really need to comprehend and come to terms with, is that you are under colonial occupation and colonial rule. The United States is an empire. It is a colonial ruler over you as peoples and nations. So it's a state of mind. And of course, the United States doesn't want you thinking about it, talking about it, hearing anything about it. They don't want your attorneys raising it. Most of the Indian lawyers, the law firms that work for Native nations, never raise treaty rights or international treaty rights, treaty law, international law, and so forth. So it's a state of mind, and the government's just totally happy with that. This is where I'm kind of an outlier, as I see these things as a process of assimilation. And if you don't fight back, then you'll lose eventually. So you have to exist. They're talking about your survival at this point: resist, indigenize, and decolonize. And decolonization is becoming a popular word right now among Native, around the world, actually, among Indigenous. I just got back from Geneva, where I worked with Indigenous peoples from Africa and with the UN. We had a UN meeting there. And this is an issue going on around the world. There is a decolonization movement globally right now among Indigenous peoples. There are lots of allies around the world. So, step one is to regain power. You have to start decolonizing. How do you, by the way, this is not a 10-step program, but it is a 10-step program for decolonizing. Don't let the colonizer control the language. I'm speaking the colonizer language right now. I mentioned earlier earlier that I'd love to see this whole meeting conducted in Lakota and have somebody translate it to me. Someday, hopefully, that's where your will happen for you. But don't let them control the language, the discussion, in what happens. One thing that McGurk did recognize is that Native nations do have an inherent power that's in that U.S. Supreme Court still recognizes that Native nations have an inherent authority and that they retain whatever authority hasn't already been taken by the United States as a colonial power. So you have to repeal the RA. Is my opinion, my view, because under the RA, Native nations are colonized. That is a colonizing document. It says that you're subject to the authority, and this is in every IRA constitution, you're subject to the authority of the United States government. And you're created. The IRA governments are created by the United States government. They're chartered. It's in all the constitutions. And so Cheyenne River, and there's even been a survey that I came across on the, and they sell the IRA as an economic deal. You'll get you'll make more money, you'll function better, and so forth. I read this study where they compared the IRA and non-IRA tribes, and they found out that the non-IRA tribes were actually economically more successful than there. And think about that. If you're a non-IRA tribe, it's going to give you more control over your natural resources, over your territory, over your lands, and so forth. It gives you independence. You don't have somebody looking over your shoulder so much. So then you have to indigenize, and of course that means restoring your law. Once you get rid of the RA, then you can have your own constitution, a traditional constitution, which I understand Victor Duville was supposed to talk about today, and others have talked about. But going back to some of the ways, maybe starting with the Tioshpae or TYA or Oshpae, and integrating that within your governance decision-making system, and then creating your laws. Tribal courts are not tribal courts. They're U.S. courts. Tribal courts are authorized under the RA. They're run like Western courts, and they mostly implement Oceti law. They use Oceti procedure, Oceti rules of evidence, and so forth. So part of reclaiming your identity as Native people and your sovereignty and your authority is then being able to restore your traditional laws, Wolfe. That's called customary law. And then, by the way, there's a big movement right now recognizing Native law. So this is something that is really big right now. And the international courts and even some of the domestic courts, particularly in Canada and other places, even in the United States, they're starting to recognize Native law, the law of your people, of the Lakota, Dakota, Nakota law. So that should be, there's a great opportunity right now in development and focus on that, create Native law. So that's your first place you look. You don't look for the law of the United States. You don't look at the U.S. Supreme Court, federal court. You don't even look at state court. You look at your own law, the Lakota way. And one of the early cases on that, by the way, was the Crow Dog case in 1883, where the U.S. Supreme Court recognized that the Lakota people had their own law, and they were applying it in that case. So that's where you really want to go, from my point of view. And once you get a good solid foundation on your own way, on your own law, that's recognized within your communities, then you'll have something to stand on, to fight back on. And you can fight from a position of strength, all right? And in creating that strength, part of the problem with Native peoples, and I saw this in Obama too, and when he was president, is you don't want to start from a point of weakness. You want to start from a point of strength. You don't negotiate You don't negotiate, give up the room when you walk into it. If you're going to sit down with a colonial power like the United States, you have to be as strong as you possibly can be. And one of the ways of becoming stronger is nation building, restoring the Oceti. I looked up on the internet a little while ago how many Sioux people there were. There's 200,000 or so people that identify themselves as part of the Oceti. 200,000. I mean, there's 67,000 people in Rapid. So you do have power in numbers, and if you can get united in that way, then it'll give you some strength. And it doesn't mean that you have to go back necessarily the way things were in 1800s, but that's up to the Oyate, including the member council fires, each of them. It gives you an opportunity to design your own 21st century governance that reflects your values. And so it can be a traditional and modern. One thing I was thinking about, because I know there's always a struggle between the treaty councils and the tribal councils. You could keep the reservations, and looking at the Great Sioux Nation. Yeah, you could certainly keep the existing tribal councils as dealing with the infrastructure issues for each reservation, the roads and health and so forth. And then you could have a traditional governance that deals with anything that's in common throughout the territory, and certainly at the international level. So you could include both. It doesn't have to be an either or situation, and it can be done by treaties. There's nothing saying that each council fire can't get together and you can sign. The Chechichikoan, the way that I look at it within Western terms, is basically a confederation of council fires, confederation of oyates, of nations. And so you can sign treaties, which might be a charter or a constitution that you can work on between yourselves. And then the fourth step would be to challenge head on these laws. Need to overrule McIntosh, the doctrine of discovery. Coming on the 200th anniversary, I've been biting at the bit to go after this. Under international law, the doctrine of discovery is dead. The only reason why it's not dead here is because no one's really challenged the United States on that. It's been thrown out in Australia already. It's been thrown out internationally. And so I'm just waiting for some native nation to come to me and just say, we're doing this, by the way, I represent the Onondagas in a case at the international level. We are challenging the doctrine of discovery. But it doesn't have a leg to stand on. The only reason why it still exists is because of the authority of the United States, not because it's legal. And so need to reject and rescind the doctrine of discovery. I also think there's a possibility of going back over the Sioux Nation decision because the basis of that decision, the ground rules have changed. And the McGurk decision stated that it had to be a stronger declaration of Congress for the taking than what was in the Great Sioux Nation. And because the money hasn't been accepted yet, I think there's an opportunity to reopen that and see if the Supreme Court might revisit that. I'm not going to hold my breath on that one. I have no faith in the colonial courts, but it's an opportunity out there. Whoops, Phil, I know what's going on here. Yeah, I don't know how to get. Is that? Oh, it's not showing on your screen. Okay. So, and then I think we need to restore treaty making. If you're a nation-to-nation relationship, then the way that you resolve things is through treaties. You don't resolve them through an act of Congress. You don't resolve them through an agreement. Resolve them through treaties. So in order to engage in treaty making, you have to get rid of that 1871 Act. And as a lawyer, and I've looked at the 1871, I think it's an illegal act of Congress because they deprive the treaty making authority of the president. So it's an invasion of one branch of government on the legislative, on the executive branch, which is not allowed under our Constitution. So I think a good lawsuit might actually get the 1871 Act thrown out. And if that's the case, I think you could force the federal government to sit down and renegotiate treaties from a position of strength. So if you're going to have a true nation-to-nation relationship with Washington, it's got to be done by treaty. Anything of any great substance should be done that way. And then at that point, step 6 would then redefine your relationship with the United States. And that can be any number of ways. I know the United States is worried about the Oceti or the Dene or others wanting to be independent nations. And sometimes that's not really realistic. Other native peoples around the world are starting to develop a different relationship, one that I might suggest here is what's known as a plurinational state. In Bolivia, they have a plurinational state where the indigenous nations work with the state of Bolivia as a confederation. So they have representation in their legislature, in their Congress, and they work together. And so the native nations sit at the same level as the state of Bolivia, and that's why they call it plurinational state. By the way, Chile is setting up the same kind of state. Another one is autonomy. Real autonomy like they have for the Nunavut people up in Canada, where they have more authority over their people. Step 7 would be to regain authority over the territorial lands and so forth to resolve those disputes by treaty. So if you can't resolve let's say the Black Hills dispute by treaty, once you can get rid of the 1871 Act, you sit down and renegotiate the treaty. And not only renegotiate the return of the lands, where you get land back, but also reparations. And you do it under the Vienna Convention. You do it under international law. We're talking about nation to nation. So you don't do it under the treaty interpreted by the U.S. Supreme Court. That's the colonial court. That's the court of one party of the treaty. That's not allowed under international law. The Oceti law for interpreting treaties is the Vienna Convention on Treaties. And if the U.S. Supreme Court had used the treaty law as it existed in 1823 and so forth, in 1977 or 1980 on the Black Hills case, it would have said that it would have thrown out the treaty, and you would have gone back to the 1851 treaty. It would not have given the violator the right to keep the land. Step 8 is think outside the box. And if you have a nation-to-nation relationship, then you're talking about international law, right? Within the world community. It still was Oceti law, but it is part of that. One thing they have under international law is what's called the principle of comity. Principle of comity means that the other nations have to recognize your law and your decisions. So, for example, one thought I had was for the Dakota Access Pipeline. Why not bring a lawsuit challenging the authority of the United States and Dakota Access to add that pipeline because it's on unceded lands? Why not bring that in a court of the Oceti and then get a decision from your court? I mean, why is it they can bring it in their court, but you can't bring it in your court? Get a decision in your court, and then you use this law of comity, which is also a principle of federal law as well. Use this law of comity saying you have to recognize our decision that says that the unceded lands are still treaty lands and there are lands. So that's using Lakota law, Luve. And Phil can correct me on how I pronounce that. He does. Anyway, so then you have international remedies, which are the rights of nations and peoples. It includes collective human rights. Collective means that they're rights of peoples. You hold them together. And that would be like the right of self-determination, the right of sovereignty, the right of culture, the right of language. Those things are called collective human rights under international law. And they're recognized on all of the major international law documents. The Charter of the United Nations recognized, and this is interesting language here. The Charter says recognize all peoples and nations, large and small, are equal. And that's a fundamental rule of international law. And the reason why that's important to you is as colonized peoples, it means that your rights are equal to those of the colonizer. Your rights are as nations and peoples are equal to those of the United States nations and peoples, which means they have no right to colonize you. Colonizing you is a violation of your equal rights as peoples and nations. It's called violation of the right of self-determination, which is also included in secured in the International Covenant on Civil and Political Rights, which was signed and ratified by the United States. And this is how it's defined. All peoples have the right of self-determination. By virtue of that right, they freely determine their political status and freely pursue their economic, social, and cultural development. And freely is an important word because obviously if you're colonized, you're not doing anything freely. So this is a fundamental principle of international law, or the law of nations. And this should be binding on the United States as well. And they violate this every day. That's where the free, prior, informed consent comes from. Free, prior, informed consent comes from sovereignty. It comes from the right of self-determination. And you've heard a lot about that. The other big treaty, and the United States has also signed and ratified this one, is called the Convention on the Elimination of All Forms of Racial Discrimination. And in that one, this treaty, which the United States has signed and ratified, recognizes colonialism as a violation of this treaty. So the colonial relationship, which is undeniable, between indigenous nations, native nations, and the United States, is a violation, outright violation of this treaty. And that essentially was already held in one case involving the Western Shoshone. So let's see what we got. And then you have the UN DRIP, the UN Declaration of Rights of Indigenous People, which doesn't really create any new rights, but one thing it does make clear is that Native peoples are equal to all other peoples of the world. So that provision in the UN Charter is reflected again in the UN DRIP, saying, and these are all the rights, a lot of the rights that are secured in there. And I would go through them in more detail, but I just don't have time. So now you get into an area of what we call restorative justice as a matter of law. And there's actually a UN international guideline on this. And it's called the Basic Principle and Guidelines on Right to Remedy and Reparations. And it lays out things like the Truth and Reconciliation Commissions. By the way, the United States is debating whether or not to do a formal Truth and Reconciliation Commission on the Indian boarding schools and do an investigation on that like they did up in Canada. That's a bill pending before Congress now. But that's one start of a remedy, and it lays out reparations, land back. All of these are outlined in the guidelines in our part of reparations. So that's under international law. You get that. Another source is the UN High Commissioner, where you can file human rights violations complaints. The Native people of Hawaii, for example, have a pending case before the UN High Commissioner. And then you have this Committee on the Elimination of Racial Discrimination. And it's this committee that enforces that treaty I just mentioned on racial discrimination. And in that one, the Western Shoshone filed a complaint and won their case. And in that case, the Committee on Racial Discrimination held that federal Indian law violated the equal rights of Native people. And that was a land taking case because it didn't give them a right to get their land back. Does that sound familiar? Then another source of remedies under international law that's quite common right now is the Organization of American States. They have two bodies there. The main one that we deal with is known as the Inter-American Commission on Human Rights. And the main case there for us is the Dan case, which was brought by the ancestors. And they won that case. Again, it was a land right case based on their treaty. They had a treaty violation. And in that case, the commission held that the United States had violated the collective human rights of the Western Shoshone people when the ancestors attempted to exercise their rights on their treaty lands. So these are lands that have been taken, treaty lands they were grazing their sheep on. The U.S. Forest Service claimed that land and kept taking their sheep, and they won. They said we had a right to, and the reason why they won is they said that the United States had illegally taken the land. They didn't give them an opportunity to get their land back. Therefore, they had a right to exercise their treaty rights on land that had been wrongfully taken. Think of DAPL, the uranium mining case, and so forth. So step 10, well, first thing we do is kill all the lawyers. That's the last one. So anyway, so thank you, and I appreciate it. And I don't know if you have any time left, but I'm happy to answer any questions.
Question. You can use the mic back there.
Okay. Divide and conquer is one of the primary tools of the colonizer. And here Native people are in situations with these IRA governments imposed by the colonizer and also their own traditional governments, which seems like a setup for more divide and conquer tactics. Are there practical models to dismantle the IRA governments in a way that unifies a tribe and does not further divide them?
Yeah, there's been a few. I have to go back and I did some surveys of constitutions, tribal constitutions. And I think the Pawnees are one, but there are some that actually have a traditional body that oversees matters that involve the traditions of the people. And then they have a more modern functioning tribal government. Sometimes they're called business committees or whatever, that deal with the roads and schools and finances and so forth. But that's one I can think of. I know the Dene people have a court system, for example, that integrates the traditional ways. They call it a peacekeeping model. And so their court system isn't based on the Western concepts of retribution, but it's based on the concept of getting balance and harmony within your community. And so they have their whole court system built around that. So there are different ways. Those are two examples I can think of. Yeah.
Good afternoon, Andy. It's me, Reno Red Cloud. I got just maybe a clarification. You're talking about the U.S. Constitution and our treaties. Then I've been hearing a lot about international law and treaties. Has there been any, or what's the relationship between the United States and the international law? Is there any court cases that have been between the two parties with the international and the United States? Because the United States is, they say they're the superpower, but how are they a part of the international treaty group?
The United States has this policy of what they call exceptionalism. And what that's supposed to mean is the United States views itself as so humanitarian, so good, that they don't need to sign any human rights treaties. So they've avoided signing like the treaties on the rights of child, treaties on women. A lot of the human rights treaties, they won't sign the American Declaration on Human Rights. They avoid these treaties because they say we don't need to do it; we're already complying. But that's just a way. I call that doublethink. That's a way of talking. It's like saying trust when it's not trust; it's domination. But it's a way of them avoiding their responsibilities. The thing about the treaties, and there's been some recent ones, the United States doesn't have to sign those treaties. In the Dan case, the only treaty the United States has signed was what's known as the Rights and Duties of Man, which is a very broad one, as well as the OAS Charter. And so what the Dan people were trying to do, Dan sisters were trying to do, was to enforce their property rights. And the United States did not sign the American Declaration on Human Rights, which talks about property rights. There's also an American Declaration on the Rights of Indigenous Peoples, which the United States hasn't signed. So you had all these human rights documents out there that Native people could use if the United States would just sign them and abide by them. Well, what the commission did on that was they looked at the broad rights in the rights and duties of man. There's a right to property, and they said, well, what does right to property mean for Native people? Property has one meaning for white people: private property, money, which was the basis of colonization. I mean, that's why they raped America after the gold in land. But it has a different sense for Native people. So what the court did is they looked back and they looked at all those other treaties and they said, well, even though the United States has signed them, we're going to look to them on how to interpret this. And so they looked back and they were one provision in the rights and duties to man that said the fulfillment of spirituality is the highest goal of human existence. And of course, they're talking about Christian spirituality and all that. But they said, well, how does that apply to Native people? And they said, well, let's see, we're looking at property. We're looking at spiritual growth. And then they tied the spiritual growth to the land, to the property. And they said that Native people have a responsibility to the land. They have this special relationship to land that's different than the Oceti. And then they recognized that right of property. And they said that right had been violated. So they were able to use all of these concepts and things that the United States had never agreed to and used them against the United States. So I call them bootstrapping. So they bootstrapped them all in. And I've seen that in case after case after case. So the United States may try to escape their responsibility, but they can't get around it. More recently, there's a case called the Chagos Islands case in the Pacific where they create the military base Diego Garcia. For you that have been in the Navy, it's a big military base out there. They moved the Native people off the island to create that base. Well, they sued the U.S. government and won. And in that one, they said that they didn't even use a treaty. They said the right of Native people to their lands is what they call a jus cogens right. It means a a right that nobody can violate. You don't need a treaty to enforce that. So there's certain rights like the right to equality, the right to liberty, the right to life, which includes the right to enjoyment of life. You don't need treaties for those. And so and this is one of the areas I'm working in, there's a developing area of law. So I'm going after the United States. I don't need a treaty. They're violating the rights of existence. And those are called fundamental rights. And in the Chagos Islands case, they found the United States to violate those rights. And there's some recent cases for the Garifuna people I'm working with out of Honduras. They're indigenous people along the coast there, native people. You might know the Arawak and Carib and some others, but Kalinago people. In that case, they also ruled that the Honduras, by not respecting their territory, had violated their fundamental rights. So they didn't need a treaty. They violated their fundamental rights to equality and to property and so forth. So I don't know if that answers your question, but they try to get around it. But their ways, if you have a good lawyer, that's why you should never have lawyers tell you that when I started working in this area, nobody wanted to go the international law route. I remember when Bill Means got the International Indian Treaty Council going and others, everyone was laughing at him. NARF was laughing at him, saying there's nothing there. And then they get the UN DRIP. And still, these federal Indian law firms, they don't have international lawyers working with them because they're convinced that they can't beat the United States on this. But if you don't try, you'll never find out. So, yeah.
Okay, thank you.
Andy,
Yeah.
good afternoon. Virgil, taking a live here from Sandy Rock. Always enjoy your presentations. You keep me awake, especially after a good meal. But simply for me, it's back to the future. We need to go back to where we were previous to contact. And a lot of us have an awareness of what that was. And you talk about it. First thing you said, one of the things you said here was being able to have these meetings in Lakota, and then you'd be looking for the translations of these because the language is so important and inherent to what we're talking about. And the right of governance, right now, we talk about it, but how many Tioshpayas are in true existence right now? Who has one that's truly operating as a Tioshpaya throughout the Oceti Sakowin? I'm not going to go anyplace else but us. We organized a Tioshpaya in my family, but haven't gotten to the total part of it. We know what it is, and even though time is made shorter now by flicking a switch rather than turning a kerosene lamp on or turning up the thermostat rather than building a fire, and etc. And we don't do that, but we talk about it a lot. We talk about the importance of it a lot, but like at a meeting now, and I'm glad you bring it forward, Andrew, about the language and how important it is to these gatherings, because the language in the way I understand it is much deeper than when you translate it. It's like going from the Bible to the English translation into that Bible, for some that may know that. But thank you, Andy. I wanted to jump on that. And the last thing I want to say, too, for our relatives here, we have to learn how to sit down and discuss things rather than argue about them. It's always when somebody starts argument, or the argumentative process starts, really gets tense because we don't know how to sit down and discuss rather than argue. Pilaw, Andy.
Okay. And what do you think would happen if every tribal council passed a resolution saying that anything we send up to the BIA, we're going to put in Dakota. We're going to send it. We're not going to send it in English. We have a resolution. It's going to be translated and sent to the BIA. Let them deal with it. So you create a structure for that. When I was putting together a challenge to the Dakota Access Pipeline. One of the requirements I had was I was going to write that I was going to have somebody translate it all in Lakota, and we were going to file in federal court, not in English, but in Lakota or Dakota, and let them deal with it. That's their problem. The English is not the official language of the United States. It isn't. The United States does not have an official language. So there's nothing preventing you from filing something in your native language. The only thing preventing you is you don't have the resources to do that. So you need to develop those resources. If you can set aside money to pay lawyers, fancy lawyers from big law firms, you can set aside $20,000 to hire an in-house interpreter to translate things into your native tongue. The other thing I wanted to mention on that is my wife's Japanese, and when I got married to her, I got put on her, they call it a koseki, which is her family chart. And the federal government in Japan, they keep a chart for each family. It's kind of like a tiyoshipaye. And so you have roles. Why not take all of these tribal roles that you have and just have everybody go around and identify their tiyoshipaye on the roll and their oshipaye on those roles. So you know everyone on those, all 200,000 Lakota, Dakota, and Dakota are identified with a specific tiyoshipaye, and then you have a way of contacting those folks and being able to get your Nakcha and your other representatives set up. There's a possibility to create a structure to make this thing happen. It's just a matter of somebody. I can't do it because I'm not. I'm not Lakota, and I'm not a tribal leader.
How
Your tribal leaders can do that.
matakia le wakia chikala mancha na wakpawa ste yake ke watielo. Ya sente waste ya na pech use papelo le omnichu happy ke le Lakota ni Lakota hunters wana inuzin po. I'm Bryce Inwoods. We've been going at this since '98 when we started the United Native Nations. Our principal chief was Dave Baldigo. And when we brought it back to the Good River concentration camp there, we had all the elders sign up to the United Native Nations. But that's not who we are on the ground. And right now, this man here just confirmed the old deal, these 10 points he made. We here have to answer the question. We had representation, Ichachans for the 4 bands in '98. We had nothing but adversity from the IRE government because they didn't know the Lakota language, culture, or tradition. And these IRA governments are here to do away with everything Lakota. Pointing back would be there's 15 council reps on this IRA government on the Cheyenne River. We're not Cheyenne River. We're not Sioux. We're not tribes. It's a federal recognition. But on that flag, it has Itazap Chola, Minikoju, Oanupa, Siasapa. That's who we are. Now, from '98 to 2008, when Russell Means and them come up with the Republic of Lakota, Nuchlad away from this Milahanska, they set a precedence. But because we have a division of tribal government and we don't have a traditional government of Ichachans, now it comes to 2015. In September of 2015, all these major nations on this planet, they had fulfillment of their prophecies. The Palestinians, Islam, Muslims, Mayans, it was all recorded. And the signs from above, from Akhbiyatakia, there were signs in the moon and the sun. And now there's signs from the earth. Very important to have our language, Ichachans. Now all those Ichachans were all full-blood from '98. A lot of them World War II Korean veterans. Nobody's filling those shoes. So we always are asking questions when the question is, we need a legal governing body. We have a Titron Oyate Constitution. We presented that in 2018 here. And they came up with that in 10 years before that, 2008, when Russell and Gary and Phyllis presented the Republic of Lakota at our in Eagle Butte at the high school there, auditorium. I got it recorded. So he was looking for facilitators to start a legal body of governance. So from 2018 to 2022, you're going to hear me saying that we're spinning our wheels in mud and whatnot. Those tires the steel belts are showing on the tires because we're still spinning. We're not who we are. Wakantanka made us Lakota speaking. We're Nupa. Made our families. Wakantanka did that. Now you have Ptesawi. Nobody talks about Ptesawi. Ahi, na kigle, wo. Did she come and go already? Are we hearing the message? So this Constitution was signed February 2nd, 2019, and I mentioned it to some individuals, and some of them signed it. But for 4 years now, no movement, like stale water, it becomes poison. We have to be fluid like Mene, because Mene is what we're going to have to fight for now. So this Constitution was signed at the Veterans Center in Eagle Butte. 90-year-olds, they're in their 90s now, signed that. Those elders signed it. So it's a legal document now. And it represents the Titron Oyate. So the Lakota speakers said, hey, don't forget us in Canada. But if you look at the Mets and Bounds over there,
We have 1 minute.
it's distinct. So that Titron Oyate Constitution is there with signatures on it. Some Oglala signed it. Who are the Titron? And those elders I work for, they explain these things in Lakota. No, they're not here no more. But we need strong, solid people to start a legal governance body for their Oshbaya. That means they're banned. We had 4 Itatsans representing the 4 bands, but this IRA government, they couldn't, there was a lot of corruption over the land, our own land. And that's the problem. That's what we're trying to address now, is that council reps on these IRA government shouldn't be using tribal land because they don't know nothing else but a cow. They don't know about those children and elders that are hungry and suffering in every community, on every reservation. It's the same problem. So let's get a legal governing body going now, because these IRA governments need help. Otherwise, we're going to die, suffering. We should have a right to be happy. And this is the way I talk to this IRA government, because I'm under 4 years now. I'm an insider whistleblower. And when these old guys said this IRA was to do away with the Lakotas, our 90-year-old Korean veteran, full-blood, fluent speaker, retired this year. I think I'm the only one that speaks Lakota now on this government. So, this IRA is to do away with you guys. Our traditional governments of the Titron, 4 bands are on the Good River. We need to get back into this traditional governance and start providing services for our people. Otherwise, those steel belts, that tire is going to blow out and we'll still be on spinning. That's all. We need help from the Chanupa. Well, I want a copy. Orville needs to help us get this traditional old honey going. He needs to help us. I went to him in 98 for this help. The Itachian started with the Nachao Kolakichia that year, 98. Our ways is going to save us. They told us go back to the original instructions of Tesawi, the 7 rights. We need to do that. All our families need to do that because of these meth and alcohol, all these social, economic, problems are our problems now because we're not going by the original instructions given to us. That's a very dire warning from 2015. 17 years went by. Now they're talking 20, 30 or less. And we were told last year we got 4 years to unite. 4 years to unite. Well, now we're on that second year now. Are we still going to be spinning that tire and not having a traditional? That's who we are.
Uh-huh.
We need to get back to that now. You Titwan need to sign that constitution. Well, now you need to stand up and put your life on the line now and quit talking. We need to start doing it. All this other stuff, you're just enabling IRA to just let us die. And I don't like what I'm seeing from IRA government from 22 years now. And now it seems like the devil himself that they brought over here is running the show. Wasteshni mitakapi. Le wasteshni. Who we are is what we need to go back. We're Teton Lakota speakers of
We got-
Ospaya.
We got a question, and we're going to try to stay on schedule.
Look, Keith, sorry I get kind of intense because I actually even cuss at the council, so
Yeah.
like a white man.
We try to keep our agenda going through the time schedule, and also questions should be directed to the presenter here, so that way we know. So Darla, you have a question?
Lano woya glaka ki washte na lechala fil wogla ke na ija he takuku si changu ki a tiwa he na ija oshpaye na ija kakeshke takuku echum na maska untanta echum na ija le Washington DC ekta lana wo ki hena IRA government ki maaska ki lana hiu. Chawana, I'm going to switch over to the English language from my beautiful Lakota language so these younger generations can understand what I'm saying. But I really appreciated what Phil had to say earlier when the meeting first started. He talked about what the Sichangkus are doing, and that they're going toward a different way of finding funding sources to take care of their people. Now, historically, when we look at things, historically, the way the IRA government is set up is these funds filter down to the BIA. And the BIA takes their cut, and what little crumbs that are left comes to the tribes. And then they want maybe 80 programs to fight over those crumbs. And every dollar that comes in there are treaty dollars, our health care, our education system, and even the protection of our water. And I think, coming to this treaty meeting, I was looking forward to, I know I read a part in there where the Treaty Council was looking for solutions. They were wanting to hear from us for solutions. What can we do? Because the way the IRA government is set up right now, we are going to have to, like Phil said, we need maybe to add on to that, to build onto that, to bring more resources to our people, because they're not going to take that away. And the only way that we will be able to make a stand, Mitakiepi, is we're going to have to stand together and support the ones who are outspoken and not try to silence them because you disagree with what they say. Or you disagree that they're female? Maybe some of us are designed and built to speak for our people because we see what is in our homelands. We see our Wakanki crying. We don't have enough wood to keep our elders warm. And some of us made the travel here because we want to hear solutions. What can we do? What can we do to help our people? There's 80% poverty on our homelands. And the jobs are taken. And that person will hold that job until they retire. We teach our young people, we tell them, we say, go and get an education and come back. And we're filled with young people full of education and no job. We have tribal council people that are in there 10 to 20 years, and we hear the same rhetoric. We need to stand together toward that change. And if we can't stand spiritually, then there's something wrong with this picture. Think about what our ancestors are thinking about us. You know, we think about the Battle of the Little Bighorn. We all stood together. And the blood of those ancestors run through ours. And like I said earlier in the beautiful Lakota language, where Trump looks like he's going to get back in there. And we need to unite now. We need to listen to what the Sichangus are doing because I've been watching them. And I spoke to a lady earlier at breakfast that told me some disturbing news. That when this COVID hit, there's a lot of people that died suddenly from COVID, and they have no wills. And now BIA is saying that if you're Rosebud and you have lands in Oglala, you're not going to get those. And that should be appealed. Because when our people died of COVID, they died suddenly. And perhaps didn't even think about a will. So when this land buyback came through, maybe we needed to read between the lines. Because it was probably in there. There's a young man that's sitting at this table with us right now that's educated. And he's talking about a school that doesn't have a multicultural affair program. So we need to start our own movement here. We need to model somebody positive, somebody, in my opinion, like the Sichangus, because I see the good that they are doing. And we need to stop fighting and saying, oh, well, that's full blood, or they're half-breed. We need to stop that because if you have an enrollment number, ni lakotab. Unlakotab, mitakiepi. Na tiata tiwahe dukdektel ata unshia yankab. Na tueni hena okyabshni. Na woi te yuhabshni. Na huncha na ija wigli yuhabshni. Na oyok shiche mitakiepi. We need to turn this around and we need to look at our young people. This man shared some stuff with us that is interesting. Their way of thinking. We need to quit fighting one another. We need to stand together. Whether you're male, whether you're female, whether you're young, you're old, we all have a big fight here. And we need to stand behind this treaty council. Because you know what? Those treaties are ours. Our ancestors died for those treaties. And our people are dying. because we're not using our treaties. Chawana mitaki epi, we have to look at ways. And maybe this lawyer here can tell us, what can we do? How can we do this? Because the dollars come through that federal IRA system. But I believe in what the Sichangos are doing. I like what they are doing. I have been watching them for the past 4 years. And sometimes those of us that are outspoken were oppressed intentionally and lied about and removed wrongfully. But you know what? Malakota. And I'm still going to come back here because I have grandchildren. And I have to voice my knowledge. Treha akichita hemacha, na treha changsa hemacha. I gained some knowledge. And I was raised by an unchila to say, you need to bring that back to the people. Chawana, we need to come together. Na wona wizi. Na wo kipaji kilena. Take it out. Take this jealousy out. Take this hatred out. We don't need it here. There's other people that are fighting each other. Ula kotab. We need to help one another. Wo pilai chicha mitakuye oyasi.
Thank you. Thank you, Darla. Before we finish up with Andy Reid with his presentation, I know it was brought to my attention during the lunch, and I was very impressed. We overlook a lot of people. We overlook a lot of issues. And we have Miss Cook back there. I don't know if she's still here. Is she still here, or did she leave? She's an author, a book author, and she's from Fort Thompson. And she was here having lunch, and I didn't know. We talk about elders, and she's one of the elder ladies that are here. She's 96 years old. And I was very impressed that she was here to be here with us at a time and listen. And maybe she was going to have an input to this conference, and we kind of went another direction, and a lot of issues came out. But in our way of life, there's always a balance, and that balance is what it is. Sometimes it's always positive, and sometimes it's always negative. But we know that balance kind of balance everything out on a first day like this. I know we're going to be here tomorrow, 3 days, a lot of good information that's going to be shared with all of us. And we like to keep that and that going. Sometimes it takes a group to start something. And when you take that group, support it no matter what, because there's a lot of issues that's going to be brought up. You may disagree or you may agree, and how you support it like that. Shahechun amitakwipi tona anohoftapi lila wopilathanka okeni chapi, and I want to thank Andy Reid for presenting. I know as a lawyer, you brought a lot of good attentions and how to support and how to go forward with that. So I want to say thank you very much. I know you're probably done right now, but thank you very much, Andy. Thank you. Give him a round of applause, ladies and gentlemen. Manny, is Manny here? No, Bill's not here. Justin? Klon? Okay. We're going to go right into our Sichahu Treaty Council. The chairman, Claude Tuak, is our next presenter. And then we're going to try to call upon Manny Ironhawk, if he's here, or Harry Little Thunder. It's just lecha ua. It's a wagala kinkitelo. Sound man, can you turn Claude's mic up, please?
Testing. Testing 1 2. Testing 1 2. Yeah. We talk pi troka wopala chicho. Don't a hippie. Okay. Yeah. Tiktok on kitrap. Dona wachati shacoin. Piwa on kitrap ki. And wabla on you have. Dona hana on kakijo. Akuku yahani. On chishin. Tunkashal on kitrap ki hana. Dona hana nachji. Yaha komani. Unchwashtena, unchwashteshne. Okay, Vijan Washichu Wobalaki. Good afternoon. My name is Tokala Hochokan wa Okia Old Money. I received that name from my tuish by 1996 because that's what I've been dealing with and working with our communities and trying to heal our people. The reality came from a liquor store on the western edge of a rosebud in Millette County called North, in a black pipe community. 28 Lakota women and Lakota men died in the front of this North bar in 1987. Talashiwa Umakyak, a resident of the black pipe community, he said, you know, Tahashi, 28 of our Lakota relatives died here on the streets right in front of that liquor store, that bar. Well, nobody cares. Who cares? You know, that encouraged me because I recently sobered up 1985, September 12th. In the first 2 years, no matter where I went, no matter who I talked to, whether it was AA meetings or whatever, I always said, I'm sorry. I'm sorry. Sometimes I don't know what I did during the times I drank. So in my recovery, I had to learn how to say I'm sorry. Since September 12th, 1985, I've been walking a good road. Chunku washtewa. Tunkashala ahani chunku lutama. Unkupi. Shahe akamawani. Well, first, I had to make my commitment up here at Bear Butte. And I cried. And I cried. And I cried. You know that saying, walk a mile in my moccasins. You'll know how we feel. I thought of the grandpas and grandmas and what they went through. The historical traumas, what they went through. 1918, my mom, I'm the youngest of 9. My mom was born in 1913. She was 5 years old when she held my grandma, her head on her lap, when that Spanish flu took her life. A lot of our families passed on from viruses going way back to the times whiskey barrels came up to Missouri and Mississippi. Hey, we don't have to go into their camps and behead them anymore. We'll just send this whiskey up to them and they'll do it to themselves. Ya me toque piwaheha. Ohihinai. Ohihani. Ohihinai. Yellow. We've come to that point now. That's where we're at. We're killing each other, whether we're related or not, and we don't care. I'm talking to my conscious about my talk today, and some of the things that we talked about was that some of us have unresolved grievances. Some of us are carrying many generations of unresolved grievances. Way back 5, 6 generations back, this family stole horses from us. So we don't like that family. One of my grandpas, he had a nice pair of black team horses. And this grandpa from the other side, amongst our Teoshpai, was jealous of him. And one night when we weren't around, when he wasn't around, he came over and he cut the horse's hooves right above the hooves. And his team of blacks, those were our cars in those days. Those 2 horses bled to death. And these are things that my family has remembered for a long time why some of us don't like that family. Still carrying it inside of us. Our grandpas and grandmas, especially the grandmas, say, Hemana ayushtayo. Ayushtambo. You know, the 4th part of the ceremony is releasing, letting go. 4th part of the ceremony, before you come out of the sweat, we send the relatives home. They're releasing. 4th part of the ceremony. In my process of recovery, that's what I had to learn how to do. Let it go. Today, Khanshi Rick talking about one of the mental behavior we have is Okhashita. And I see it amongst my Teoshpai. When we moved to town, when I was 9 years old, we moved to town. My dad took me to the whole community. Kingshi tipikile lecha ushnio. My son, don't come to this house. Why? Bakwe. Chi nahachchi tipi mahel nahachchi wachanshita. There's an energy called that we get rubbed off on kawo ayapi. Hena ayapi cha heche na onuni amani. We get rubbed off. Whether it's good energy or bad energy, we got energy rubs off on us. How many of us had allowed relatives to stay with us who just got released from prison, who killed people without no heart, no mind, and we let them stay in our house? Because inside of us, we have wola kota, we have unconditional love. It's hard to kishicha a relative. It's hard to tell someone to leave. Some of us have weighed the differences. If an uncle did something to our relative, our daughter, they weigh the differences. And even though our daughter or granddaughter endured the pain of an assault, we looked at that relative and said, "Lila Oshika, I wonder if I should report him or let him go." How many of us do that? How many of us go through that? We don't address it. We don't address it. We let it go. We still have a lot of criminals walking around Rosebud. A lot of our communities, reservation, Oceti, Sakowin, Mahel, Naakchi, Wichasha, Na Weon, Shikap, Hana, Ogna, Timahe, Omanib. There's a lot of evil energy. Why we find dead bodies in the ditches, in the water. Who killed them? We don't know, because nobody cares. A few relatives that do, it's hard to find the killer, because a lot of our relatives take up for each other. Why we can't get rid of our bootleggers, why we can't get rid of our drug pushers. I like what Darla said. She's been a law enforcement officer for a long time. These are things that we need to address. A lot of our good medicine men left this way feeling very sad, or some of the relatives that are doing bad things to each other. When the Allotment Act came out, these acres slowly started going down smaller and smaller because the VIA and whoever didn't teach us how to leave a will. And then a lot of viruses that killed our people, smallpox, flu, a lot of them didn't have a chance to leave a will. So we have a lot of fractionated interest in land. And what little we have left, some of us have sold that land to the buyback program. And some can't remember how that money was spent because of the alcohol. Some have died before they spent all their alcohol. I mean, their money on alcohol. So that's sad. Oh, shijalo. Chamahel. Ocheti shakoi mahel. We can heal ourselves inside. Hochokan timahel ake onkupi. Hochoka mahel onkupi. Ahani tunopawa. Teo khalap. Today, this tunupa over here, I thank my Tanashi Wendell for loading that pipe. I thank him. Tunupa ke ahani yuha imachake. I grew up with this. My grandma. The chewing ke that's my grandma, Nettie, Buffalo Hornchip. Tanashi Dickey is here. I grew up with Dickey and all of our cousins. Went to a lot of ceremonies. One of the things my dad always told me, some of us are reincarnated spirits. Ahani tiwayo kishab ke mahel oko wanji nahi ki aketi mahiu akema kha akamani. The grandpas and grandmas watched these little ones, and they could tell which ones our grandpas and grandmas come back here to live on this earth again. Reincarnation. My grandpa Robert barely survived Wounded Knee. My great grandma, Earth Nation woman, saved 5 takojas. As they got a little older, another trauma of going to the boarding schools. This boarding school, when it came, a lot of our Wablenicha were shipped off to Carlisle, Pennsylvania. And I read and seen a documentary how they were treated under horrible conditions. Some survived, came home. My grandpa went 6 years. Name was Robert Two Elk. He came back and he married my grandma Nettie, Buffalo Hornships. And I grew up on Wombly. I'm the youngest of 9. My mother is Nellie Fire. Let them have enough. And her dad is Silas, who's Hohoshu. I have Bud and May from the north. I even have a grandpa who's Hunkpapa. We have a lot of stories like that, but it's going to take a lot of time for us to talk about them. But I just want to share these things today because Nachchi, we chasha Ija takuku honey and you watch Mom Chahecha Alan Patu Ake Leche Wahina Jinka one black hello. I've seen a lot of things growing up. And I remember grandpas and grandmas said, "Hokata wichasha najike and lena awa ableza yohayo." But first I had to sober up. Piyuta shitake ayustampo. So how today I come up here, I just want to share these things with you. I got my second master's degree from Oglala Lakota College in 1996. And I remember we're talking about the Allotment Act and fractionated interest. And I remember a joke. So I told this joke to them. A grandpa came home to die and had all this letters with his fractionated interest. He went all over looking for a place to rest with his takoja. He was trying to find a place where he'll be buried. They were standing on top of a hill with the water going by, river. He said, "I like this place." It's about that time a leaser showed up. And like all Washichu leasers, he got on and said, "Well, hello, Joe. How you doing?" He said, "Well, I'm trying to find a place where I'm going to be buried." He showed him these papers. He said, "This is all the land." So he got that paper and he looked at it, and there's a lot of fractionated interest. Like all Washichu leasers, they all carry calculators. Pulled out a calculator and he's really tapping away. And he said, "Well, according to this, Joe, we probably have to cut some of your toes off and your arms off, and we have to bury you standing up." Yeah. So these fractionated interests, a lot of us didn't teach us about fractionated interest and how far away we come from the decimal point, how much land we have. I remember one of my lease checks is 26 cents. Back in the day, the stamp was worth more than the lease check that was given to me. But these are things that I'm glad that we're waking up. I'm glad that we're going on this healing journey. It's like recovery. You have to learn how to say, "I'm sorry." These are new words for us that are recovery. We also need to say, "I love you." I love you, my mom. I love you, my Tioshpai. I worked at a juvenile delinquent center teaching our kids how to say, "I love you." As soon as we said it the first time, the first thing they think about is sex. So we tried to make that thinking change and learning how to hug each other, learning how to shake hands, learning how to call each other by relative. Tumi, Tahashi, Takoja, Kelana. And only the Otakakija. A lot of our young people grew up not in a healthy way. And we need to teach them. We need to hug them and tell them we love them. So I just want to share that with you today, and I wish all of you the next happy few days to cheer on your relative over here and whatever they're doing. My daughter made me proud here. One year she brought back 17 jackets from LNI. Really made me proud. And I remember one of the jackets when she was being awarded, one of my relatives stood up in the crowd and made the dee. Man, it almost made me cry.
Hechituelo, Wopila Kla.
Wopolelo. Thank you. Wopolelo.
Thank you for. We'll go right back to the singers. Then we're going to go right into Manny. Iglo Manny, get your paperwork over here. And right after the singers here, take a good stretch. And then Bill Means, are you here, Bill? All right, come on up, Bill. I need you up here. Okay, okaki e apo wana. Thank you, singers. Wopila Tranka. All right, now I'm going to introduce you to my brother-in-law, Bill Means, and also Manny. Manny, where are you? Okay.
Testing. Testing 1, 2. Namako mo. Oya I mitaku pi ea iha wa chianka pi lea petuki. Na ea chante uchigi na kapi. Ea hechelon kospep na osponki api. Ea nampe ashna nampe ungluha. Na ea henachi la kolia na ojimpi ta hechitu. Ea le hochwoju. Inawa ki hochwoju echata. Na ale troka ankanksha e macha. Na he gluha ba na laha wa ihoni na le petuki. Na ea taku I chama na taku bulahana hena wopila tranka bluha. Naha ya hochwoju wichasha, ekche wichasha, mija apimichia, dokulukihika, washkan, naha apimichia, che ulakotapi, naha lakotap ki lilash agya, wicha ki naji pikte hecha, naha ena uspunkiapi, ash ugana unyamshin. Ipach shina nojipi. Chanku wansapa cha ugana shina uyam. Ash chanku luta ugana gloni chapik. Chaya hechel mija wa u. Na a petu kilalila wopia wagala kapi. Tona wagala kapi hena. Hena iuha hechitu. Me ibelukcha ekta. Taku e hapi hena hechitu. Na nahachti taku nglustamchni. Nahachti ushkampik de hecha. Chi kitrawak khanja piki. Na trakoja piki. Na hachti hena najipi. Na woniu re nichu hapi. Taku ku iniu rakte. Lala. Na ish kaka. Lena iniu ram na ha. Alup aita lupte. Oyaki hikte. Eta. Na la kolia. Na ku auchi ukta pikte. Lahan. Ja laha mija la kolia bi manchare. Na ohakab taku English yapcha. O spemich ichie. Techi English ki. Ash dokishke kakpa wa hiu. Iapikile. Na mish iapiki. Techia wichakap. Ihanke ekta oapcha. Hier ni waya uyam nashna. La koluyam chanshna. Na pe el kapcha. Heha helwai. Ho ash hechena tiata la koluyampi. La kolia nojipi. La kolia wochenkiapi. Jaya hena wexie. Le ampetuki. Ho. I'm going to switch over to British English and American English right now, so I'll be in between somewhere. You'll have to bear with me. Cheyenne River Wakpashte. We started a treaty council. We have some members here. Malvin, I don't know if Malvin's here. Ivan is here. Harry couldn't make it because of the weather. And but we thought about it and we said we have to do this. A lot of people don't agree with what we did. But somebody has to do it under the titre. Hochwoju titre Oceti Sakowin. Oh, echt, that's it. So if somebody asks me, that's what I say today. So we talked about kinship. Okay, I am a double grandpa, and if you know what double grandpa is or double grandma, yeah, and that gives us a responsibility to talk to our grandchildren and our children. So I tell my children, they're all grown up now. And I basically tell them the same thing. Do the right thing. Don't drink. Don't do anything. Don't do drugs. And finally, one of them said, Dad, How come you always tell us that every time I see you? Because I'm your ate. And ate can tell you that every day. Until I'm gone, you won't hear it. So I tell that to my children and also my grandchildren. The kinship has to stay together and has to stay strong. Wahokunkia. I don't think we don't do that anymore. That has to come back too. When we see a wrong, we need to say something. If we don't, we're just as guilty. So today, I agreed with all the speakers this morning. We talked about the cultural, spiritual, and custom laws that we still have. That still needs to come back. That still needs to be practiced with the Tioshpai. Now, I come from 2 Tioshpais and some more in some of the research. On my father's side, I come from the Maspreginaka. On my mother's side, I come from Sparadak, under their Tioshpai. So, my dad, all of us children will be playing. All the cousins, girl cousins, boy cousins will be playing. My dad will come over and he'll stand there and I look at him and hey, what did I do? And he just tells me, "Lena obiashkate lena, you hatakui chaya." These kids that you're playing with, you're all related to them. You remember that. Every once in a while, he'll do that. And he always emphasized, you're from the Maspreginaka Tioshpai. So I said, okay. I didn't know what that meant until later. And how important those Tioshpais are. Tioshpais are the foundation of the Oceti Sakowin. We must find our Tioshpais and our Tioshpai names. Do your research. And we must stand in unity. No matter what. So, but with our Tioshpai Council, we still went on. And just recently, we provided a budget for our treaty office. Didn't hear nothing. Didn't hear, come in to the budget committee meeting, we'll talk about this. Nothing. And the treaty office was approved way back in May. And the treaty office was referred back to the district. Tioshpai resolution, okay? I really thought about that Tioshpai resolution. And I said, oh, okay, we'll draft one and we'll put it in. They said, we're going to refer this to legal review. To this day, I haven't heard anything. One of the council members said, Manny, you're gonna take over the tribal buildings. Where did that come from? No, I said, we're trying to work with you. We're trying to make the Teoshpai people survive because there's still some Ushika relatives out here. I said, you'll see them walking the streets. Some of those are your relatives and my relatives. Teoshpai, we need to help everybody. And I tried to talk to one of them that I know. And they said, hey, you don't have to live this way. You can go to that, get help. And no, this is my life and this is what I want to do. And you leave me alone. So, watch this. But I think there has to be some intervention somewhere along the line with some of our Teoshpai members. So I'm a descendant on my mother's side of Wounded Knee. She still has the story. We still have the story. And she tells the story and she gets angry and then she cries. Well, that's transferred over to me. And I told my family and Renee that that's going to have to stop. We're going to have to start healing at some point. So, on my own, I started my journey for healing. I went to codependency. I went to All Nations Healing Center. My brother Dallas said, come over. And I first got there, he was waiting and he took me into the barn and he said, Manny, you need to do work? Yeah, I'll do some work. 2 big circles of men in that barn. You go here and you do your work. So I did. Lifted some heavy weight from my shoulders just to be an Ikjeri to be a father, to be a good uncle, to be a good husband, to be a good relative. I took that journey. And I'm still going on that journey today. So, in closing, I wanted to stress unity. I know Phil started a Cheti Shakoy, and I told him he has a big task yet. We only touched on a Titrua. What about our Dakota relatives and Nakota relatives? The territorial space. In unity, I believe it's the most important thing we have to do to get things accomplished. But the main important thing is we started a treaty council and we addressed a few things. And now we have a new chairman and Wakpashte, so and a few new council members. So hopefully we'll get a good working relationship with them and get our treaty office going in the near future and try to start addressing our some of our people's issues and work together with all the treaty councils and all the Teoshpais. So O apre don't chichi sotape. I used some of your time, and I thank you for listening. All of you are good listeners. You're all looking at me. You're making me nervous, but I still have to talk. So you are good listeners. I don't know where you went to school, but you're good listeners. Oha, hechituilo, pilamaya.
All right, thank you, Manny. Wo pilalo. At this time, we're going to call Madonna and Bill to come up here. Bill lost a niece, and Ted's daughter, Faith, means made their journey. And we like to have, I know Bill sits on the Treaty Council and a spokesperson, but took the time to come here and along with his sister Madonna, like to have him come out towards the over here, and maybe the relatives could come over and shake their hands. But before we begin, Kanshi Dikimus Kablecha Wochiki Waji Chakagab Naha, ya Etan Ukaki. Hallelujah. Waki Papi. Oh, yeah. Oyo Kshicha Stakomni Wichabli Hunchapina, ya. Napayun Zapina Hachi. Atakomeni Lana, ya. Hihunipi. Naha, ya. Lethaha wa Wogala Kinkdash. Iha Aphenaha Lana, ya. Waki Papi Chaheche. Atakomni Lechosa Olakotapi Nahaya. Wazilia pina wocheki okarab na ya okake olon aya piktelo chahechosa awana trashi
Ja, očeki on kara piktes, ke juha tro, ptala wat šonkia piktelo. Makha kan taku o techika, o jate ki taku i hanke o techike ke he wanji oeche kola transhi. Mr. Means in Tiwahet Hawk, Means family na Akipchap, and Conjon wanji doket kigale. O hena taku ni iha o techikis. On peti yohila wota kweki ha wichungano nebe. O chanke lila o techikis. Leche tu chance na wokik champte wochik ye hechela. O he on transhi na hankashi balihich apo da komene iha. Dank opert inktan kicharap chanke apetu an jigdish no kirala. Oar tronjan kigale kele ata otechik na hachtu chinchala. Na hachtu ati ota ni unkte yechechashka ungenahala kigale. Da komene wichonchare wa unkompi kele wichozanik he trokapcha. Daku iwongala kapina, daku makaka wo bge iwongala kapar hena dakonish. Daku wa yohanke wo ichak na Gluha na onrim kte he wichozane he. Na wichonchare wa onhapi kele o yohanke wa nichinkte. Ochanke ablehicha po na wo ichala unkitcha pik met konjala toket kya kigale da komeni hetchi atkukuona. Wotakwe omchanke wanchagala kinkte he wo ichala onha. O he on petu kele o itho tronkashla. O hetche iotan wa khaya ompik o hetche. Tiwa wa wa kip khayu hapina. Muchinjala onje toket kya kigaleke. Takoni ya o techikis khatkhashla nie. On kiogana pe wa khanit khag. O hetche unshu chakida hetche mitakwe. War chin tranka o chaku o naha. Ektahala chanter shichapik. Takomani Wotak Takora Otapik or Yahaitak Tapik the Hesse. On Petukele Mitako Yohila. Yuha Takon Kitself. Now then Yuha Oyate Angela Hetsa Sound Compi. Otanke Oapkele from Karsula Onshula or Hetsa Tuala or Hetsa Mitaka.
Wolfpila, Okaki, wanna. Friends and relatives and come up and encourage the family here, my brother-in-law and sister-in-law. Thank you, singers. Thank you. Times I know that we lost loved ones, and there's times that we don't speak in front of the people in time, and there's always a ceremony for that and wiping of the tears. And tobacco and water, but the family just wanted to express that at this time. So thank you to your brother-in-law, Bill Means, taking that time to share that with us. So. Next on our agenda is Carla Ray Marshall, one of our presenters. Phil said you got 10 minutes to present due to the weather, so we're trying to. I know Syed's here, so we're going to allow you only 2 minutes.
She needs to connect her PowerPoint.
Okay, thank you. My name is Carla Ray Marshall. I'm a enrolled member of the Cheyenne River Sioux tribe. My Tiwahe is the Marshall Duchesneau on my father's side, and on my Ina side is the Mestis Birdwell Tiwahe. So I'm part Oglala, Minikoju, Tituan Lakota, I guess. So I work with the Black Hills Clean Water Alliance, and I'm here to talk about the Black Hills is under attack by modern day mining. And I was thankful that they put it on the last 2 pages of the agenda. There's a list of mining operations, mining projects that are here in the Black Hills. Last year at this time, I was invited to the Great Plains Tribal Chairman's board up at the Mother Butler. They said, go pick up the fry bread first. I was like, okay. Went to the wrong building to pick up the fry bread, but anyway, I made it over there. And there was USDA representative Heather Don Thomas. She was there. She's a tribal liaison for the USDA. Wizipon Garrett, or Little Elk, I guess he goes by. He was there. But since it was for the tribal chairmans, I was giving my respect to have them speak first. And getting towards the end there, I knew I wanted to talk, and I had my mask on, and I wanted to say something, because we kept getting notices after notices about these gold mining operations, not only gold, but the uranium projects, rare earth minerals, and now lithium. So just as they were, Heather Dawn and them were trying to get up from their table, saying they were trying to get to the next presentation they were going to, I jumped in front of them. Jumped in front of the table, and I know that's kind of disrespectful, but I didn't want them to leave without them hearing me out. And I was, under my mask, I was like, the Black Hills are under attack, and there's gold up in the, I was just, I was on a roll. And so when I got done, then Heather Dawn came over and gave me a hug. She was like, I will hear you. I said, well, hear us more. Because right now here in the Black Hills, here in the Resapa, the heart of everything that is, we are totally under attack. I've got my Google alerts on, and for a while there, we were just bing, 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 So I wanted to show a map of the hills, but I'm not hooked up to show the map right now. But if you look up in the Bear Lodge, up in the Matotipila area of the Black Hills, then there is Rare Elements Resources, which is a company that came in back in 2014 and wanting to mine rare elements, rare earth minerals in the Matotipila, particularly Bull Hill. They wanted to get in there and start mining rare elements or rare earths resources. So that is one area that we have to pay attention to. Right now, the company is called Rare Earth Resources, and it has gone into partnership to do a pilot processing plant for rare earth elements in the Upton area. But they are also coming back and looking at doing the mining operation too. The mining permits that they were seeking, they let that drop, and then they went into getting a permit to do this pilot processing plant, which they received to $21.9 million in 2021 from the Department of Energy. There's also, so that's one area that we have to pay attention to. That's on Forest Service land. And when these projects come into the Forest Service does what they call a scoping. So they look at the scoping, they send out a notice to the public, and then the public is asked to comment on these. So a lot of us commented on that. And if they pick those permits back up or try to get those permits again, we'll be right there to comment. The gold that they want to mine in the northern Black Hills, that is totally under attack too. So right now, the only large-scale gold mining that is in the state of South Dakota is called the Wharf Mine. The Wharf Mine is 7.5 miles in circumference around that mine. It's a huge open pit mine. So that's part of it. That's part of the gold. It's called Dakota Gold. They were formerly Dakota Territory Resource Corporation, but now they changed their name to Dakota Gold. They have applied for 3 state permits to drill for gold on private controlled lands. When they come in and they try to drill gold on private lands, usually what they want to do, is they ask to, if they want to drill like a water well to use it for their permit, for their drilling process on private lands, they need to get a state water permit to do that. Otherwise, to get around that, what they've been doing now is they've been going to local municipalities. So like Dakota Gold will go to LEED and ask for a water permit through purchase water through their municipalities' water. So that's one way of getting around that state permit. Let's see, the Wharf Mine, only large scale, like I said, they're expanding. Dakota Gold is just north of the Wharf Mine. So I don't have my map, so. But let's see, now, then there was a former Homestake. If everybody knows about Homestake, if you're wearing Black Hills Gold jewelry and stuff, that's where that gold comes from. They are a closed mine, however, they had contaminated 18 miles of Whitewood Creek. So Whitewood Creek comes out of Lead, Deadwood area, goes down to Deadwood, and it's Whitewood Creek that flows into the Bear Creek, Bear Butte watershed. And that flows all the way to the Cheyenne River. Back in 19 Mineral Mountain Resources, F3 Gold, those companies are looking at exploring for gold. So they're coming in saying, we're not mining, we're not a mining company, we're exploration. So when they come in to explore and they're on private lands, like I said, they if they want to use water out of Rapid Creek or out of any of the watersheds or drill a well, then they have to have a state water permit. If they go to a municipality like Mineral Mountain Resources, that they were up by Peshla area or Rochford, they went to Keystone and asked to purchase water there. And I went to the city council meeting that they were going to be at a couple summers ago. Keystone said, no, we're not selling you water. So Mineral Mountain Resources, what they did is went to Lead and they purchased water from Lead. They were taking the water truck back up to Rochford from Lead, and their water truck wrecked, hit that guardrail, and it, hit the guardrail. They had to release that big barrel of water that was on back of that truck. I mean, it was huge, like one of those big cement truck things. But they had to release that barrel. That rolled down the bank into Rapid Creek, and they had to release that water into Rapid Creek. If that was mining waste, that would have been a catastrophe, because it only takes like 28 minutes from that site into our water system, which Rapid Creek feeds Pactola. Pactola feeds all of us. Rapid Creek feeds the whole western part of South Dakota, while it goes, all the way down into the Missouri River, basically to the Cheyenne River, all the creeks and tributaries all the way down. So F3 Gold, now that's a company coming in from Minneapolis. Where do I start with F3 Gold? Okay, so they did a scoping meeting, or scoping. Forest Service put out a scoping back in October of 2021. We pushed people to go comment. Send in your comment on this. So that was back in October of 2021. There was over 1,000 comments that were sent in. Of those comments, the Forest Service came out with what they called a FONSI, finding of no significant impact. The FONSI, and I told the Forest Service this, so when the FONSI came out, then those that had commented on the scoping now had standing to object to that FONSI. And I learn something new every day when I'm, working these, to protect our water here in the Black Hills. Every day I learn something new. So now I got a standing in that objection. So Forest Service came back and they said, okay, now those who submitted their initial comment on the scoping, they can go back and now they have a standing to object. So there were several of us that objected. Forest Service came and they said, we want you to be part of an objectors meeting. And so during that objection meeting, people were getting notices, and it was coming from a weird email address, LillisUrban at, what is it called? Truth or Consequences. We're like, what? So I was like, I didn't get mine. Gee, I guess I didn't say anything that made any impact on them, And so I looked back through my email, because I was getting people, saying, did you get a notice? Did you get a notice? Looked back through my email, and I did. I got a notice. So the very last day that I could say, yes, I want to be on this meeting as an objector, then I emailed them back. And they put me in all the categories. So apparently I said something great. I don't know what it was, but so during the objectors meeting, we had like 4 or 5 hours on Zoom. And during the objectors meeting, they touched on tribal consultation wasn't done appropriately. NEPA wasn't done appropriately. EPA violation, just went down the list. So during that objectors meeting, I went through and we got through it. And towards the end, I always give this comment when I do my public comments to the Forest Service or any of these projects that's going to contaminate our water. I always say, the Chesapa, this is where we originated from. This is our place of being, where we came into being as human beings. The water is sacred. The water is our main entity. It holds in our DNA, it holds our memory. And so when I was kind of giving my closing, I guess, one of my co-workers, Lilius, you guys met her last year, you know her, Lilius Jardine. She said she was watching the Woman's Fate, this Lilius Urban from Truth or Consequences with the Forest Service. And she said, I think you almost made her cry. I said, I did. I said, well, good. So when we do these comments, though, you have to come up with something that's going to be concrete and black and white to them. I mean, we could, say how special and precious the Black Hills is to us. But when I was doing my comment, I looked at their significant impact. And in some of their impacts, they were saying, we have to move some vegetation. We'll have to cut out some of this vegetation. We'll have to do this and that. I said, that's an impact right there. So I just put it back at them. So we're still waiting for that decision. And I guess whatever that decision is going to be, if they still allow F3 Gold to do this exploration, we're going to say no. And that's where we need your help. We need every one of your help to help us to stop these projects. It's a huge, huge task. There's only 4 of us that, and like he gets up there and he was on that meeting too, and it was, it was intense. So what we all can do. So then the other projects that are coming in now is the lithium, and this is for the EVs, the electric vehicles. There's lithium projects that are in the Custer area that are coming in. One is Iris Metals, that's an Australian company. I went back and I read their description, and it said, we secured land in the place where Custer got sued. It's like, what? You're in the wrong state. But Iris Metals is one of them that wants to come in. Lotus Metal is a kind of a local company. There's another one called, it's not on the list here. Iris Metals, there's a lot of them. Okay, so those are lithium projects that want to come in here into the Custer area. So that'd be in Fall River County, some of it in Pennington. So we were watching those, and because it's not a hard rock, then they don't have to go by the permitting processes that uranium or gold or silver, any of those have to go through. And the state of South Dakota, they never denied a company mining. So those are really what we want to do now, is to work with the state legislator to try to strengthen the mining application for lithium, because that's going to be a whole nother ball game. Let's talk uranium. Y'all heard about the proposed uranium project? We've been barking this since 2009. First, we were fighting Power Tech. Then they changed their name to, got some shares by Azarga. Then Encore comes in and picks that up. So now we don't know what they're called. Encore, PowerTech, Azarga, you know. But they're getting close. They're getting close to getting those permits that they need. And so every step of the way, we're fighting them. Thankfully, the Oglala Sioux tribe jumped in there and they appealed. They're appealing it every step of the way. So they are basically staked out. Another company came in recently. It was called Pegasus Resources of Canada. And they had some mining claims down in the Fall River County. But if you heard about the Fall River County passing an ordinance or passing an initiative that uranium mining is a nuisance in Fall River County, it passed. Pegasus, December 3rd, Pegasus pulled out. They retreated. So they are no longer seeking to mine uranium down in Fall River County because of that initiative. They thought they were coming to a mine-friendly state. They didn't do their due diligence, I guess. However, Pegasus was under Cowboy Resources and something it's called. So Cowboy Resources has those mining claims. Pegasus came under Cowboy Resources. Now Pegasus said, no, we're ending that agreement. So they're out, but Cowboy Resources still has those mining claims. Yep, and like I said, the next project was, the Dewey Burdock project, which is the proposed uranium mining. And so we've been fighting that since 2009. I started with Black Hills Clean Water Alliance back in 2014, going around to all the different counties and looking up all these claims and stuff. And little by little, I started doing more and more. And now I take care of the website, some of the social media, and try to get as much information out there, the emails. If you want to learn more, I heard the other day that people were saying that they don't know what's going on. And I'm like, oh, it makes me sad because, we put out a lot of information too. If you'd like to get on our email list, if you go to bhcleanwateralliance.org, there's a contact button there. Just put contact and just email us, say, I'd like to get on your email list. We don't send out junk mail. We send out stuff that has relevance. The other thing that we're doing too is we are trying to work with the Pennington County commissioners to do a hard rock mining ordinance. And we've been working with them for 2 years. And Pennington County the planning board kept minimizing the rules, or kept minimizing what we needed to do in order to get to strengthen up those hard rock mining ordinance. Now we're going to ask for a moratorium. So I just want to thank you for allowing me to come and speak with you today. I like to use my map, but maybe at another time I can hold a Zoom meeting with you all if you want to join, and I can show you more about what's going on, where the watersheds are, how this affects all our water. Because this is really important. I mean, if we don't stop these, we're going to be looking at some large-scale minings, probably bigger than Wharf, if we can't stop them now. And in all our materials, we always say that this is treaty territory. So I want to thank you all for allowing me to speak with you today. And thank you.
Carla,
Got one question. 1, 2.
Question.
Yes.
Carla.
One,
This
one,
is
two.
Paula Antoine from Rosewood. I have a question.
Yep.
How many mining claims do you estimate are on the Black Hills?
220,000. 202,000, something like that.
202,000,
Yep.
and that's for all the various different minings, lithium, uranium, gold.
Yep. Yep. And we keep finding new claims too. I just read an article today that the Bureau of Land Management who handles these mining claims, they're understaffed. So we're waiting for, some of these maps to be updated and stuff. And as we update those maps, then we put them out on our website. We make sure that we, send them out to people and stuff so that we try to keep up to date on these. Now I got to go back through that map and take out Pegasus. Put it, yeah.
Of them mining claims, what is the process for getting approval on them? How can we assist in opposing them mining? Is there any way to oppose them?
Well, for one thing, when they ask for a scoping, like I said, when these companies come in and they ask to mine on Forest Service land, so federal lands, then they do a scoping. That's the initial scoping. And then after the scoping, they usually do a EA. And the Forest Service will come back and say, well, we have finding of no significant impact. And we're like, well, how can you not? And this for the F3 Gold, I was like, of all the people that commented, well-educated doctors and lawyers and, tribal people, and, we had a lot of very highly knowledgeable people writing their comments, documenting things. And then they came back with a FONSI. We're like, how can you not do that, And so it's important that that we find anything and everything up there in the hills that is going to make an impact. Like this last time, there was I think a yellow-bellied snake, or I don't know if it's yellow belly, maybe it was red, but some kind of snake that was up there in the hills that was hardly seen. I remember a long time ago when we were looking at Peshla, I was kind of on the backside of, doing some research and stuff, and there's a mushroom up in the hills that hadn't been seen in decades. If we could find that mushroom, I can't remember what mushroom it is, but if we could find that mushroom, and if it's growing there again, that might give us standing to say, no, this is going to be an impact on this, species. So, but just also on our website, we have, I've set up federal, state, federal, state, and municipal public comments. So we're always asking for people to comment, to come to meetings. It shows unity that when we're at meetings together, and at least, send in your comment. So I'm cool.
Hello.
Hi.
Hi, Carla. My name's Ampo. And how many of those claims are international? So I work with the International Indian Treaty Council. So yeah, do you know how many are international
Well,
claims?
if we count Canada as being international, yeah. So there's MMR, which is a Canadian. Oh no, MMR is Minnesota. F3 is Minnesota. Iris Metals, that's Australian. Let's see. I have to go down that list and look. So if we look at Canadian companies, a lot of them will set their offices up in Canada or Vancouver, and and then they'll come over, and then they'll set a local office up here. Like PowerTech, that was a Canadian company that came in and set a local office up down in Dewey Burdock with a local rancher. His name is Mark Hellenbeck. I couldn't remember his name, so I have a nickname for him. But anyway, but so yeah, Mark is a local contact person there in the Dewey Burdock area. And now they're NCOR, they're coming in and saying, they had their advertisement. They had all these cows out there and stuff. And like, yeah, you like glowing cows, I guess, but because it is a fact that if they drink water or eat grass that was contaminated with past uranium or whatever, then that could affect that food chain too. But I'll have to get you those numbers on, go back through and check. Any other questions?
I believe that's it. Right. Thank you, Carla.
All right, thank
Good.
you.
Let's give her a round of applause. Syed, come on up, and Reno, both of you gentlemen got about 5 minutes apiece, and due to the weather, we're trying to wrap things up here early. So, Echon sa Elena, where you chumpelo. Reno got 6 minutes, and Syed, you got 4 minutes. 2 minutes. Oh, give it to Phil.
But we'll try and make it short.
I know Syed says always try to make it short, but he's about half hour long. So these will be our last two on the agenda. Then we'll have a closing prayer, then a honoring song by the singers, and then we'll be back here tomorrow morning. I believe registration's at 9 a.m. or 8:30. 8 a.m. And turn one of these mics on, mic man. Sound man.
Reno, give your.
Oh, right here. It's a Great Plains Tribal Water Alliance. Okay, can you hear me?
Oh, sure, absolutely.
Just want to thank you guys for letting us come give our presentation today. My name's Reno Red Cloud. I'm with the Oglala Sioux Tribe. I'm with the Water Resource Department. I've been with them for the Great Plains Tribal Water Alliance. But today I wanted just to give a presentation on the Great Plains Tribal Water Alliance. I've been a board member since 2013. I've been the president before from 15 to 17, and now I'm the vice president. But in my PowerPoint, it's going to show the officers. But the Great Plains Tribal Water Alliance, since I've been on it, we've addressed a lot of issues with the Missouri River, with uranium mining, just like what Carla Marshall was saying, with Dewey Burdock, Crow Butte, just different things that affect our treaty lands. And first thing that we always bring up in our public comments is the treaties. Article 6 of the treaties is the treaties are the supreme law of the land, and 1851 and 1868 are the supreme law. So I even said that at a couple of meetings. What she was talking about with Fall River, we were at that meeting and we gave our support for the residents of Fall River to oppose Power Tech at that time. So I'm glad to hear that initiative won, and they got a uranium company out of Fall River. Okay, Syed, do you wanna? Okay, here's the Great Plains Tribal Water Alliance report. The board of directors is Doug Krogos, chairman, Standing Rock Sioux Tribe. Myself, I am the vice chairman for the Oglala Sioux Tribe. Elizabeth Wakeman, she's the secretary for the Flandreau Santee Sioux Tribe. Mary Jane Gourneau, Lower Brule Sioux Tribe. And Mr. Syed Huck, Water Resources Director, Rosebud Sioux Tribe. I worked with Syed previously. We both worked together on the mini Wachoni. I worked for them for 16 years, and we were instrumental in when it was constructed. that we ran the operation and maintenance departments previously. So I have a good working relationship with Syed for many years now. So I'm glad and honored to work with him on a higher level with the Great Plains Tribal Water Alliance. Okay, the Great Plains Tribal Water Alliance, climate resiliency work. When we first started, we were mainly just into water rights, the Winter's Doctrine, treaty water rights, protecting and preserving our water, the Missouri River and on our reservations. The White River runs through our reservation and on to Rosebud. So that was our deep concern. But and after that, we kind of got into climate change, climate resiliency, because the government was looking at climate and drought mitigation. So we put in for some grants on the Great Plains Tribal Water Alliance, and we received them. So that enhanced our academic and our outreach to other tribe and our tribal members to really address climate change issues which are happening right now. Okay, we do have a liaison outreach to tribes in the Great Plains region. We have a BIA grant where we have two staff members, Stefan Tangent from CU Boulder and their Kinzer Washachuk from Kansas, and they're both outreach workers for us in climate change. And they're doing all the data and research with these grants that we have. Our big how do you say vision for the tribes is to get these outreach and these grants out there to get all the data, and then we can bring them in for the next one, which is a drought mitigation plan. Okay, we do have drought adaptation plans where we identified our groundwater and our surface water, and we identified what USGS water availability is, the surface water. Syed's going to get into that more, but right now our emphasis is trying to get mitigation plans for the future for each one of our tribes. Okay, the next one is active opposition to KXL DAPL. We're all aware of the Standing Rock DAPL issue, the pipeline protest up there that went on for years, and you've seen the unification of the tribes and other people coming together to oppose the DAPL because of that pipeline being illegally on tribal treaty land and breaking all kinds, no permits. To this day, it still doesn't have a legal permit to operate, but yet it's still operating because the government allows it to. I'm glad to say that with the KXL, I worked with the Great Plains Tribal Water Alliance. We gave opposition in person at the state capitol in Pierre, opposing it. And we did our best. I think the Rosebud Sioux tribe even had a court case in there on that pipeline. And then just this past, when Biden got in, he just jerked it out and killed it. So that was a great thing for the tribes. Cumulative impacts, emphasize need for agencies to consult with tribes on cumulative impacts of permits, projects to climate. Since I've been in this position, I've been to about 4 tribal consultations, and we sit there and we give them all our information, our treaties, Article 6, our treaty recognizing our rights and honoring them, but half the time the federal agencies come in, they hear us out, but then whenever it's time for the decision making, it usually doesn't go our way. So, but at least we're still practicing the consultation effort through the NEPA process. My saying is, with the Black Hills, this is treaty land, and anything to do with the Black Hills should automatically trigger an NHPA cultural survey. So that's just, but hopefully that would looked at in the future. Right now in the Black Hills, there's an 1872 Mining Act that is still in effect from when General George Custer first found gold, and it's still going on today. It's still being exercised. Okay, networking with other intertribal organizations. We're the, how'd you say, the research and data for the Great Plains Tribal Chairmen's Association, but our ultimate goal is to get all the tribes of the Oceti Sakowin together to join in with us, so we could look at down the road of doing uh, Oceti, Sakowin water code, different codes that we could do together instead of doing them individually. So that's kind of our vision. Yeah. Okay, the next one. Okay, Great Plains Tribal Water Alliance, protection of the Missouri River, treaty water rights on the Missouri River. When I first started with the Great Plains, back then we were really opposed to pass legislation like with the Pick Sloan Act and then the Surplus Water Act. But now that the impact of drought is here, I think our focus is looking at drought on the Missouri River because of the lack of recharge and the lack of watersheds. So that water in the Missouri River eventually is going to start dropping down. And the majority of that water is treaty water. So that's what we're protecting. And that's one thing that we got to really look at as together as tribes is we got to protect our Indian water rights. Okay, and adverse impacts to fish and wildlife habitats affect our hunting and fishing. Those are treaty rights. Erosion of tribal lands, liability. On the lower Brule, there was erosion so bad that it just started eating away on a bank that almost went to their water treatment plant. But the Army Corps eventually helped them out and put some riprap and helped them, I think, to move their facilities. So, but inefficient use of Missouri River water. This is the big one. That treaty water of ours, there's a lot of proposed projects that are being presented, and one of them is here for Rapid City. Now, we're going to probably talk about that a little bit. It's the West Dakota Water Project, and that they're saying that that diameter of that pipe is going to be 6 foot. 6 foot. Ours at Minnewachuny is only 24 inches. So this is going to be, and our biggest fear is they're going to bring all that water this way, then they're going to contaminate the Black Hills with all this mining, and they're going to be using that water for mining too. So you got to look at the fine print and all of this. But our number one goal is to protect our treaty water rights. Go ahead. Okay, the extreme damage to cultural sites and native burials. We're all aware of NHPA, NAGPRA, ARPA, all them laws that are supposed to protect our burial and our ancestors, but we need to emphasize that with our tribal historic preservation offices to be more strongly vocal and give a stronger presence on addressing our issues and protecting our treaty water rights in the NEPA process. Right now, we're opposing Dewey Burdock and in situ uranium mining. Carla just gave a good presentation. Uh, from my point of view, we did what we had to, but they didn't consult during the Trump administration. They just bypassed us. They just approved the Dewey Burdock permits. We appealed them. We're still under appeal right now. Here they approved them for a permit. Now we're back to another appeal. So we're just doing what we can legally. And then Converse County Oil and Gas Project. Right now in Wyoming, there's 5,000 uncapped oil wells just open. And we're trying to make the companies that drilled them plug them and cap them because that's potential contamination. And yet they still want to do more wells and not even fix what they already damaged or left open. So. Okay, and then the Jenny Gulch, F3 gold exploration. Carla just mentioned that too. I was an objector on that one. And that one there is really a threat to the Pactola Reservoir because that's so close to it. And if just a slip of arsenic or whatever chemicals they're using in the process gets into Pactola Lake or Rapid Creek, then that's going to affect Rapid City's water too. Okay, and the last one is the concern with the West River Water District, Missouri River. That's the one that we were talking about. That it's probably going to be under review with this new legislation with South Dakota going on right now in Pierre with Christy Nome and the South Dakota legislators. Go ahead. Okay, thank you. Next is Mr. Syed Hutt.
Syed, you only got 1 minute. Reno took the 6. And Syed's the only Indian.
He's the only Indian in Oceti, Sakowin.
I don't have my glasses on. Is this in? It didn't go in probably. Yeah. Phil. I don't know. Did it go in first? Sure.
We need a IT, modern technology here.
Let's see if it. Okay, yeah, that's second. This. No, that's the top one. The top. Yeah, the top. Yeah, that's the one. Okay, thank you. This is my last presentation today, so I'll try to make it quick. Basically, to follow up with Reno, you know what? Great Plains Tribal Water Alliance, we believe for climate change and drought, the water code of each individual tribe is paramount. It's probably one of the most important ingredient to counter, the effects of climate change and drought. So on Rosebud Reservation, what we did is we updated our water code. We got it through our tribal council, and then we submitted to BIA for review and approval. And I'm going to show you some slides as to how we did it. Okay, so this is what we did with the water code. We updated that, and I want to bring to your attention one point that Reno just said. And this is the part of Article 6 of the US Constitution. Okay, the Article 6 of the US Constitution, what does it say? It says Article 6 of the Constitution of the United States includes, among others, all treaties made or which shall be made under the authority of the United States shall be the supreme law of the land. I mean, this is clearly stated in the US Constitution. We are not doing anything new. And this is part of our water code that, we get our authority from the supreme law of the land, which is the treaties. And it is the first item of the water code. Well, and then these are the other ingredients of the water code. We need to have water use permits for issuing permits to Indians and non-Indians. And then, the tribal council approved this resolution. I don't know if you can read it, but, in 2015, that we revised the water code. And then, we were waiting to submit this water code to the Department of Interior for review and approval. Okay, and just to give you a sense of what we are doing on Rosebud Reservation, the northern tip of the Oglala Aquifer. The Oglala Aquifer starts in Texas, and the northern tips occurs on Rosebud Reservation and a little bit on Pine Ridge Reservation. And we are trying to, manage this aquifer as well as we can. Okay, and so, on Rosebud Reservation, we drilled 28 monitor wells to determine the vertical and horizontal extent of the aquifer. And, these 28 monitor wells are the crux of our, the whole system of assessment, evaluation, monitoring, protection, and development. Without these 25 monitor wells, each of this is a location of a monitor well. We wouldn't be able to do anything that we have done so far. And this is the extent of the Oglala Aquifer on Rosebud Reservation. And this is the Little White River that flows from Vital towards Rosebud and away to White River. And this is the Keapaha River that flows towards Nebraska. Now, we need to know the thickness of the aquifer, how thick of the aquifer, and that is called an isopac map. And the thickest portion of the aquifer is in this area, over 190 feet thick. In the south and to the east, it's less than 90 feet thick. So we had to know from those monitoring wells when we drilled, what is the thickness of the aquifer on our reservation. Okay, and this is a 3D map of the same thing. This is the thickest part of the aquifer, and if you go to the east and to the south, is the thin part of the aquifer. Okay, and then we need to know how the groundwater is flowing on our reservation. They are flowing towards the Little White River and towards the Keapaha River, and there's the groundwater divide. Again, we had to have some understanding of how the aquifer is behaving on Rosebud Reservation. Okay, and here you can see they flow towards the Little White River and towards the Keapaha River. And then, from the monitor well, we have been monitoring the water table fluctuation of our aquifer. And as you can see in some of the wells, in well number 5, the water table is falling a little bit. In well number 13, the water table is falling quite a bit. And this is because we are monitoring on a monthly basis every month. And then we generate these hydrographs to see how the aquifer is behaving on the reservation, in response to water usage every year. So this has been, we have done from 1984 to 2020, and you can see that the water table is rising in some time, but it's falling, rising, So we monitor the water table fluctuation on our reservation. The good thing is, we are not seeing any substantial depletion to the extent that we should be all alarmed about. Again, this well, the water table has fallen quite a bit, over the years from 1983 to 2018-19. And this is what we have. This is a satellite technology that we monitor the water table fluctuation by using satellite technology. So we can get real-time data of our water table fluctuation. I can see it from my telephone, from the laptop, how the water table is behaving. And we need this because why? Because of climate change and drought. This is really critical that we have real-time data of the water table fluctuation. So we have installed about 15 of this on 15 monitor wells. We need to do for all the 28, but right now we have done only for 15. Okay, and see that when the irrigation season ends, the water table comes up. Just to give you a sense of that, this is well number 26. The irrigation season ended, and we did that for October of this year, and you can see the water table is coming up. So when they stop using the center pivot irrigation systems, our water table comes up. And then we need to see how our water flowing through our river is behaving. This is the Little White River, okay, the discharge. And this we have taken at Vital. When the river enters the reservation, look at the flow. It's roughly about 50 to 60 cubic feet per second when it enters the reservation, okay? But when it is going through the reservation and it's exiting the reservation, you can see that it has increased to about 100 CFS, from 90 to 100 CFS. So when the river is flowing through the reservation, it's gaining in discharge. Where did that water come from? It came from the groundwater, the Oglala aquifer. So this is critical. You know what? If this ever becomes that when it enters, it is 50, and then when it leaves, it's 25 CFS, we are in trouble. I cannot work, because then we are mining water on our reservation. We've got to keep on doing this on a regular basis. But just to give you a sense, it entered at 50 CFS, it's leaving at 92 to 100 CFS. Where did that water come from? Our aquifer. That means we are doing quite well with the aquifer management. And in White River, so it has gone further to the northeast. It has become about 100 to 115 CFS. Again, the water is gaining in the Little White River. So the same is true for the Keapar River. When it is flowing through, on our reservation, starts at 12 to about 13 and a half, 14 CFS. But when it's leaving our reservation, look, it's gaining to about 35 to 40, 45, CFS. Again, this is really neat that, this is happening with our river system, and which means our aquifer is doing good. And these are the location of the center pivot irrigation system, and they 90% belongs to the non-Indians. And all these permits have been issued by the state of South Dakota. Each one is producing about 300, 400, 500 gallons per minute during the irrigation season. And we did an accumulation of how much water they are pumping. These mostly are non-Indians, about 14 billion gallons per year. And look at this. This is about less than 2 billion, 1.5 billion gallons we use for our domestic, municipal, and industrial use by Rosebud Sioux tribe. But most of this water, about 14 billion, is utilized by the non-Indians with those permits, the red dots. Each one is a permit, and they are producing so much water from our aquifer, and we don't have much control. And why I'm showing all this is now is the fun part. You see, only recently, April of 2022, the Secretary of Interior, as you know, she's a tribal member from New Mexico, Deb Haaland, she gave us this letter to all the Indian tribes that there was a moratorium on water codes on Indian tribes. That moratorium has been lifted by her, okay, allowing us to submit our water codes to the Department of Interior for review and approval. This is a real game changer. In 1975, this gentleman, his name is Roger Morton, he just wrote a letter to the Commissioner of Indian Affairs that, hey, don't approve any water codes. And that stayed till 2022. So, like I said, we reviewed and we updated our water code. And then what did we do after we received this letter? Well, okay, this is the tribal council then made a resolution to submit our water code to the Secretary of Interior for review and approval. So this happened in 2022. Okay, soon after we received that letter from the Department of Interior that they have lifted that moratorium, our tribal council says, hey, Water Resources Office, Syed, go ahead and now submit this water code to the Department of Interior for review and approval. So first we went to the council. So council had the resolution on this. And then we followed it up with a letter from our tribal president. Okay, Scott Herman wrote a letter to the superintendent that it is my privilege to submit to you the Rosebud Sioux Tribal Water Code. I don't know what happened. Anyway, but basically, what the tribal president wrote a letter to submit the water code to the Secretary of Interior through the superintendent of BIA. And I just wanted to show you the date. We submitted in July, and now it is about December. We have not heard anything, much. Paula has been trying to, contact the superintendent, trying to get an update. Probably we'll receive that. Okay. Phil, Paula, myself, a few others, we got together and we decided that we are going to address this with the superintendent as soon as possible. So we did, and I hope, Paula can probably will give us an update on, what the superintendent is going to submit a report to us, right, Paula? Yeah, okay, so, we're waiting for that.
Yeah, Syed, she had said that she was going to be at training this week until the 19th, and then she was going to be submitting a letter to the tribe concerning our water code and our application, or our submitting of our water code.
Okay, all right, so we're waiting for that. And then, one of my last slide is that once the water code is approved, I have a flow chart because the Land and Natural Resources Committee will always tell Paula, myself, Phil, and all that, hey, what are you doing about enforcement of your water code? You've done a water code, so big deal, but how will you enforce it? So we have generated a flow chart, and this is the most important slide, and I wish we could show that. We are showing to Land and Natural, look, you can do all the, whatever you are doing to us. But unless the flow chart shows that it goes to the Department of Interior, the Secretary of Interior approves our water code, the Health and Human Services, Indian Health Service approves our water code, EPA approves our water code, then we have the next step. Our attorneys, our attorney general, our in-house attorney, our law enforcement will have to address this with the state of South Dakota on jurisdictional thing, that you cannot issue those permits, those red dots. You cannot do that on our reservation because here is the Department of Interior that has approved the water code. So now we are in charge. And tell those non-Indians they have to come to our office to get a permit. And we have a very good system of the water permits, and we are saying there will be no discrimination against Indians or non-Indians. We'll make sure you get a fair deal. If we can prove to you that if you drill a well and you pump water out, you are going to mine our water, we'll not allow that. But if we see that, hey, it's not going to hurt our, water resources, we'll keep on doing that. Okay, so we that flow chart shows that how it goes like that. And then in the flow chart, president, vice president, secretary, treasurer, there will be a water rights office, Phil's office, Paula's office, water and sewer office. All of them is going to complement our office to enforce the water code. And then in the flow chart, it shows, what tribal council, land and natural resources committee, and then my office, and then there's a new, personnel will be hired who will do the water code manager. And then there will be a secretary, and there will be two enforcement officers. Okay, and then there was going to be a record manager because we need to have proper, management of records for the water permits. So basically, we are ready to do it. And then there's the next slide would have been the budget of that office. About $671,000 BI will have to pay us so we can manage this water code enforcement on our reservation. Okay, and the final slide was the list of the Land and Natural Resources Committee members who helped our office to develop what we did. Okay, that was in 2015, and now we have got a new list of Land and Natural Resources Committee members, including Delano, who's sitting over there. He's a member of our Land and Natural Resources Committee. So, I have listed their names because they are critical to the development of this. So that was my last slide, and I apologize. I don't know what happened. It's. Is it technical difficulties? Okay. All right, but you know what? If there's any question from me or Reno, yeah, we'll go ahead. No, I really apologize. That flow chart is really something new that we have developed. I wish I could show it to you. You know what? Because the Land and Natural always says, "Hey, what are you guys doing?" Phil, myself, and Paula. So and they said, you go meet with everybody and come back and tell us how you're going to do it. So we developed that flow chart, and Phil in our last meeting said, Syed, you also need to have a water rights office. I didn't first include it, and he was very, very smartly pointed out that, need to have a water rights office. So I put a box for the water rights office to Phil, just to let you know that. Yeah, please, sorry. Yeah, go ahead.
Got a question.
Yeah.
I'm glad you guys are doing that, Rose, but we're kind of finally going to get into this everything water, the watershed, everything. We got a lot of GMO farmers. We got one farmer that drives into the reservation with 3 big tillage tractors, sprayed like heck. So we're wondering how that's affecting the groundwater now. So when you talk about enforcement, then we got to really monitor the contaminants.
Oh, absolutely.
You guys are doing harm because they created a dust bowl back in the early 1930s. They created a problem because the concept of farming is called regenerative soil now.
Sure.
A lot of these farmers have been basically put over the barrel to use Roundup, Monsanto products.
Sure.
Now they got that lawsuit, they're covered under bear now. So is that an issue on the table now?
Yeah, absolutely. You know what? As a matter of fact, I can show you another presentation where we have delineated where areas have been contaminated by nitrates. We have delineated areas which have been contaminated by arsenic. We have delineated areas contaminated by hydrocarbons. Okay, we've got 3 areas, and we do a regular monitoring of our water resources in terms of these parameters and beyond. There are about 84, 86 parameters of the Safe Drinking Water Act. We try and periodically monitor for those. And then our water system, the Mini Wichoni Rosebud Rural Water System, they have a consumer confidence report that Reno and we have been working on. You see, those consumer confidence report has to show all the parameters of contamination, what the level are. If they're unsafe, they are not going to allow us to distribute domestic, municipal, and industrial water.
That's kind of our saving grace, water quality, because the 8 functions in the core, water quality. 2012 here, the Forest Service, water quality.
Sure.
So we need to really pull together on this.
Oh, absolutely. No doubt about it. With good quality water, it means nothing. Unless we have good quality water, that's what we do. We monitor the water table fluctuation, and we also monitor the water quality. If the water quality deteriorates, then we'll be in trouble. You see, we have some limitations on Rosebud Reservation. You cannot have a house near our production wells with a septic tank, because that can contaminate our production wells. We will not allow something to be done within 2 miles radius of our production wells. Yeah, please.
Have you ever considered an entire Oceti Sakowin water code of all the tribes combined instead of individual?
Yeah, I think Reno can probably answer that, because we have been thinking about it, and we'll be meeting this Friday, and water code will be one of the important topics to discuss. How Rosebud, Standing Rock, Oglala, Lower Brule, Flandreau, Santee, there are a lot of common denominators of our water codes, so we can put that together. And okay, all right, wonderful, thank you so much. Yeah, this one, okay. So yeah, this is the flow chart. Because land and natural will always. I think it's telling me that, hey, it's enough. The weather is getting bad. You just cut it off. So basically, that flow chart is exactly what I said. But Reno and I will be talking about water codes. Okay, so basically, the Land and Natural Resources Committee is the main body after Tribal Council. Goes to Director Water Resources, Water Code Coordinator, Secretary, Records Manager, Enforcement Officer, Enforcement. This is easy part. This is no problem at all. We can do that quite easily. The tough part is this: approval and support service of Department of Interior, of Health Human Services, EPA, and then the jurisdictional conflict with the state of South Dakota by our Attorney General, in-house attorney, law enforcement. This is the tough part. This is easy too. They're providing all kinds of support. Water and sewer, treaty office, land office, they're providing real good service to us. And this is an easy portion. But tough part is this one, and we are trying to emphasize that to our Land and Natural Resources Committee. Okay, it's not going to the next slide. So, well, I think, that's about it is, what I just wanted to highlight this. But basically after that, we are waiting now for BIA to review and approve our water code. Yeah, any other questions, please?
No, I think that's it, Syed. You're done. You're past your 2 minutes already.
Yes. Thank you so much. Appreciate it.
All right, let's give them a round of applause. If I didn't stop Syed, we'll be here at 10 o'clock tonight. He's like that at the tribe. He won't stop till you tell him. No, just kidding. Oha, aya heche tulawana le unglushna picha. Tahashi Dickie let you on Wochike and Wendell. It's gonna. And then while he's praying, we're gonna take the pipe and singers sing us a song that he's gonna wrap this pipe up. We're not gonna smoke it till the last day of the conference, and then we're going to smoke it then on the third day. So we're going to do that at this time. And like I said, you give Syed the mic, he won't stop. Well, hitch it, Twillo. Singers.
Well, on Petuk Lila Yupia, we chogalakina, we chokaste, Tanshi, Mr. Tuigal, and the Treaty Council, Lila, Wopila Ichokila, we chokaste. Thankful for the gathering and a lot of good information. Lila Wopila, yeah, Trinkala. Osnina ha wokok pekach, Mitaku, yeah, Awangalakap in a Trakoja, Awan Chanka Poheche. Chankuki Omaniki Oteche Kakiap Chanke. A hepiki opta Trunkashla, Awan Chanka Mitaku, Lena Yuha. Oeche Nakon Mitaku Hoch. Wakpava Galagala Heche, Washigan and Oyam, and Awan Chanka on Heche. Da hepiki opta Tanzania Ampa Picta. Yuha ta Akehinik Ogalivita Picta Heche. Oeche Tulo, Mitaku.
Aho wo pilalo. O kake wana.
Oh, hechetuelo. Hechetuelo. Sa hieniki. Wonia cocknell.
So we hit it at 9 a.m. 9 a.m.